Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. Welcome. We are live. Welcome. So this is a lot different than what we usually do because we are live, and so therefore I have changed my intro a little bit. So as far as movie quote today, I don't know. Someone put in the chat. Someone put in the chat your favorite movie quote. The point is, we are here with the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast, and we have so much to talk about because we have AEW All Out. And I'm just going to tell you, this show had absolutely everything. I mean, you want debuts, you want great matches, you want hardcore stuff, anything you want. You want title changes. This show had it all, and we are going to talk about it with the use of our statistics as we always do. So, over here is Craig, the creator of Pro Wrestling Musings. Some would call him the Lord of all wrestling statistics. Some might even call him a god of wrestling numbers. Some would call him the number god. Jericho would call him that. Down there, that is Sergi from Pro Wrestling Musings. And if you're familiar with the podcast, you will certainly recognize Sergi. So let's start where all good things begin, and that will be at the beginning. First match of AEW All Out was Miro versus Eddie Kingston for the TNT title. This was a very interesting choice to open the match because it's not usually something that we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing those sort of really high spot matches. A lot of times it's a tag match. That's what tends to open these shows. But here we got sort of a story-driven match, something that I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to see from this, but as an opener, I actually think it really did its job well. So, Craig, take us through this opening match. Did you like it? Did you like the story that was being told? Do you think it was a solid opening match?
So this was the match that opened the pay-per-view that culminated with Bryan Danielson coming back to wrestling, which is tremendous.
Yep. Well.
Oh, right. So, we're gonna start with. Okay, sure. No.
We're gonna start. We're gonna start with the best. We're gonna start with the opening.
Okay, gotcha.
By the way, host 00312. Appreciate you, buddy. All right. Yeah, opening match. Just to take me through what you were thinking on this opening match. I mean, did you like this at all?
I did like this. I was surprised that they started with this. I thought that they might just go full AEW banger start with the Young Bucks. But this was a good start. The crowd were certainly delighted when it was announced.
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. This, as we were all expecting, Kingston brought the attitude right from the beginning, getting in Miro's face before they even started. And then, yeah, it's interesting in terms of the stats. It's fairly even. Kingston taking more strikes, more grapples. However, Rusev with submissions and the strike downs. Not a surprise that Rusev was getting the strike downs.
Yep.
Big offense also going towards Rusev too.
You can take a look at the stats right now, and you can see this is actually something that is very typical if you're new to the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. Something that we always notice when it comes to AEW when we take these stats is that big monsters like Miro tend to give up a lot of the offense in the matches because AEW's general philosophy is that you don't need a lot of help to put these guys over. And that's exactly what we're seeing in this match. Kingston has more strikes in terms of offense. Kingston, as you can see, 51% of the total offense. So this is actually, for a Miro match, in terms of the match offense percentage, it's actually a little closer than what I would have expected out of this. Because I think they wanted a much more active Miro than what we tend to see from him in TNT title defenses.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very, very close. In fact, Miro has, you could argue that Miro's not had too many big challenges. There's been, he took on Dante Martin, he took on Lee Johnson, he took on Fuego del Sol. So it's not, it's not quite at the level of Cody's title reign, but he's dealing with what he's being fed essentially. So. Yeah, much closer in terms of how the match went. Kind of big start from Kingston getting a lot in. Then it's very, very kind of up and down between the two of them until we get to around about the 8-minute mark where Miro, 6-minute mark even, where Miro takes control. Kingston has a massive comeback towards the end, around 11 minutes. Yep. And then Miro just absolutely takes the match.
Yeah, it's really interesting. By the way, Gareth, I appreciate you being here. Gareth claims that Dante Martin is the greatest wrestler in the world. So
I'm
that's
not happy that Gareth's here.
that's Craig said that. I didn't say that. Sergi,
Jokes.
we're taking a look at the graph right now, and this is really interesting because again, to me, it looks like a much more active match from Miro's perspective than we're used to seeing from him, which is definitely not a bad thing at all. It's just interesting because I think it shows that you can put Miro in this kind of position, opening a show, and he can put on that level of activity that will get fans invested for some of the higher spot matches that were to come on this one. So, I mean, do you think, looking at this, that this was an effective use of Miro as TNT champion to open the show?
Oh, absolutely. I think that we're used to the idea of seeing the high speed crash style wrestling in our openers, but there've definitely been exceptions that are real close to this, such as when Moxley versus one of the Japanese guests was an opener one time, or Christian. The one time that Christian was the opening match. This was that style of match that was a little bit slower paced, but still exciting. Definitely, the back and forth was a lot more back and forth. It wasn't so much long periods of control and quick comebacks, but a lot of back and forth because this was a much more even match. The type of match where there's somebody struggling from underneath is definitely Miro's bread and butter. That's what he does. He's great at it. His match with Lee Johnson was a perfect example of that and is really entertaining. But this was definitely something different from that, where Kingston is clearly being depicted as someone on his level, someone worthy of a rematch, really. And where you really see that is in the grapples. Where you talk about your strike down rate. If you look at the strike down rate, that was like half as high for Kingston as for Miro. So Kingston had to hit him twice as many times in order to knock him down. But he used a lot more grapples than Miro did. And that really shows that Eddie was not at all afraid of Miro, wasn't afraid of mixing it up with him directly, was not using a stick and move strategy, like I had said in my preview that I didn't expect him to. And that went along with what he had been saying in his promos. He had been talking about, these are your weaknesses, these are the chinks in your armor, these are the specific moves that I'm going to be using in order to exploit that. And most of the moves that he was referring to were grapple moves.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I wanna continue on this a little bit because I want to take a look at the per hour rates from this. So this is if we had extrapolated this match into an entire hour, and that allows us to compare across multiple matches and multiple opponents for Miro. And really, when you're talking about physical storytelling, just like you said, Sergi, they are telling you a story that Eddie Kingston is a credible threat, that he really could have taken this title off of Miro. And when you look at all of these things, let's take a look at grapples first. Miro would have had 9 grapples in an hour. That's almost a third of what he usually averages per hour. In terms of his taunts, that has fallen off a cliff. He doesn't have the time to taunt the way he usually does. His submission time goes up on a per hour basis. An hour,
usually.
Yeah, exactly. And then 40 taunts in this one. And you're just seeing all of these different things that Miro was really challenged in this match, that he was taken out of his comfort zone. And we talked about it a little bit when it comes to Lee Johnson, and we said, hey, maybe this is sort of a blueprint of how are we going to see people start to beat Miro? How is someone going to prove that they can get on that level? And now I think we're seeing the next step, which is this is how a Miro match is going to look when he's really pushed by his opponent. That what we normally have seen from him over now 8 matches that we have in this database, almost an hour's worth of time, what we've seen from Miro is gonna change if he faces an opponent that he really feels like can beat him. And I think you're seeing a very subtle shift in Miro's physical storytelling, and it makes for a much more compelling match because he's telling you, yes, this guy can beat me. Yes, I might lose this match, regardless of what you might think from a storytelling perspective.
Yeah. And it's interesting that Lee Johnson showed the chink in the armor, like you said, with, one DDT. He didn't have a high grapple rate. He was mostly focused on volume striking. But when he got an opening, he got that grapple, and everyone took notice of how Miro sold it. I remember at the time just being like, that was an amazing job of acting out like you're going to no sell, but then failing to no sell. It was beautiful, and that all led into the story that they're telling now.
Do you think that was planned, or have they run with that? Do you think Miro
really
just
question.
did it spur of the moment, or did they say, oh, you're gonna sell a DDT and then we'll build from there?
Or was it a case of did he do that in the flow of the match, and did people notice just how that got over, and the comments they were getting about that was such a great spot, like, hey, let's run with this. Yeah, I really don't know.
Yeah, I think it could be either, but I want to say, and I don't mean to speculate too much here, but I want to say that AEW, we've seen this before where they've taken stories out of these sort of random moments, these sort of references and these things that they do that you might not have noticed at the time. So I'm inclined to believe that was something that Miro did in the course of putting this match together, and Eddie Kingston picked up on that and said, this is how I'm going to tell this story. This is how I'm going to persuade people that, there's something I can do to you. Because I think AEW, more than anything else, and we talk about the roster of AEW, and we certainly will talk about the growing roster of AEW as we get on with this show. But I think the biggest thing that you can say about the entire AEW roster is that they're all very cerebral. They're all very smart. They're very observant. And I think Eddie Kingston is the absolute poster boy for that. And I think he did observe the way Miro sold that DDT. So I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if that was just something Miro did in that match, and Eddie Kingston picked up on it, and now we have this story that can go on for however long. Would you guys like to see a rematch with Kingston and Miro?
Yeah, I think that that they are heading there, and I say that mostly because they're headed to New York. I mean, otherwise I might think that they're moving on to different things, but because they're going to New York, that seems like a great time for a rematch.
Also, they kept a little back in this match. Miro never got Kingston in the game over. He had the old Accolade version locked in, but he never did the whole the bending them back type thing. He finished with he did the Roman Reigns super spear run up for his kind of kick thing that he did.
Yeah,
there was 0 finishers. That's a very good point.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a very similar story to what we saw from Kingston and Moxley, in the sense that we're being told once again Kingston's not going to quit. You can't put him down, you can't submit him, and I bet that's the story. Kingston saying, I know I can get the neck. Miro saying, I know I can tap you out. And you go to New York, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, you do feel like it's still too early to take the title off of Miro right now. But man, I mean, that crowd it's 15,000 people in New York. I mean, they're going to be white hot for Eddie Kingston. I mean, if anyone out there has been watching the U.S. Open, I've been watching the U.S. Open basically constantly over the last week since it started. Those fans are absolutely rabid, and that's for tennis. Imagine 15,000 wrestling fans getting in there, seeing Eddie Kingston. I wouldn't be surprised if AEW just said, you know what, fuck it, pull the trigger. You know what I mean?
That's very possible, but also because AEW tends to give the fans what they want, we can't forget that sometimes it's worthwhile to give the fans the opposite of what they want and make them mad, just to tell the ongoing story.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Never underestimate the power of heat like that. And normally I would have said that, But that was when I assumed that Proud and Powerful were going to win the tag titles, and we'll get to that in a minute. The fact that they probably are not going to.
It's like, well, without the Young Bucks to be the evil villains to take it from, where are they going with the Santana Ortiz? That's a very good point. But of course, we'll get to that when we get to that match.
Yes, we certainly will. But
yeah.
First, I want to get
Santana and Ortiz in general for AEW have kind of been rudderless. They're like, I would suggest they're maybe the most wasted kind of AEW act that haven't been fully capitalized on yet.
Yeah, I mean, I agree and disagree. They seem directionless at times, but also they're super over. Whenever they put on the Dead President's paint, everybody knows that's serious. It's like, oh my gosh, something's going down.
Yeah. I think part of it is unfortunate. It's unfortunate that FTR, that match went the way it did, and the injury that Cash Wheeler suffered. So that was unfortunate because I think that was really going somewhere, and they really had to change their plans on that. So I think there was a little bit of that for Proud and Powerful, that they sort of started and stopped a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what their direction is, but what I do know is they're going to be over. So that's not going to be a concern. Maybe we could see them in that tag title picture. But before we get to that, I want to get to the match that I don't think a lot of people expected to be as good as it was. I mean, maybe I'm alone in that, but I don't know. Something about seeing Satoshi Kojima, I'm kind of like, like the guy's a little older, and what's he going to be able to do in this match? I was absolutely wrong. Jon Moxley versus Satoshi Kojima was a great match, and it was a great match because it was so, like, it was this sound in a wrestling match, and it's great. I love stuff like that. Jon Moxley does a great job with it, and Kojima, like, this guy, I gotta verify his age really fast, because he has no right to be doing the things that he was doing in this match. He's 50 years old. There's no way he should be doing the things that he was doing in this match the way he was. But, I mean, let's go back. Let's take a look at the stats. Kojima with 83 strikes in a 12-minute match. Moxley, for his part, 43 in a 12-minute match. And yet, for both men, only 3 strikedowns. So you're talking about 6 combined strikedowns at the same time that they have 126 combined strikes. That is just putting over toughness right there. I mean, these guys just will not go down for anything. And to me, that is it's a New Japan match, the kind that I really, really like, because that's all they're trying to tell you is these guys are they are tough, they are bulldogs, and you can't bring them down. And that is exactly the story I see being told, played out through the numbers. Sergi, how good were you expecting this match to be, and did it surpass your expectations?
Well, it seemed like the kind of match that Moxley's been doing with our guests from New Japan. So far, I've forgotten the name of the previous one that came in to do the U.S. title.
Yuji Nagata.
Yuji Nagata, yes. I expected to be real similar to that. It was, and on Wednesday, we have something that might take that to a whole new level, because of just that level of just viciousness and danger that the surprise after the match brings.
So,
but yeah, it's very much the kind of match that he's been having with New Japan vets. It's interesting that the way that he shows respect by not showing respect, if you know what I mean. Like, I respect you enough to
take you seriously,
as if I don't.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's such a great point. And I'm glad that you brought up Minoru Suzuki. I mean, we're here. If you haven't seen it already, why are you here? Go watch AEW All Out, for God's sake. But I'll tell you this. So Minoru Suzuki,
play available. Yes.
He comes in afterwards, and Dan in our chat. By the way, thanks for the follow, Dan. Really appreciate that. He actually asked the question, which I think is a good one, which is, as good as this match was, should they have done Suzuki at All Out? Because clearly Suzuki is over. Gareth, thank you for the follow, my friend. Clearly Suzuki is over. So should that have been the go-to at All Out? It's a good question in my opinion. And I think honestly with either of these guys, you can't really go wrong. I think AEW's mentality was well, first of all, exactly what Gareth said in the chat, which is he thinks that Mox wants to fight Suzuki in his hometown, which is totally fair. And also that a pay-per-view is sort of a give and take, right? Once you've already bought it, AEW has you in the door. So now the idea is we want to make you a fan of this product. And so there's a give and take about certain surprises happen on the pay-per-view, but then certain surprises certain things should only be teased on the pay-per-view so that you become a fan. This is one of those things that I think AEW said, we are going to make people fans of All Elite Wrestling by telling them you can get Jon Moxley versus Minoru Suzuki in the US on TV on Wednesday. And I think really that was AEW's goal. And Dan follows it up in the chat that there was enough to sell people on the pay-per-view already, and this sells Dynamite. I absolutely agree, Dan.
That's true. And another perspective on it is that it's an opportunity for a match as major as Moxley versus Suzuki not being overshadowed by everything else that they had going on in the pay-per-view, but being the focus and the main event of its own show.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And it was really effective the way it was done. They've kind of done this before. They haven't. So this is essentially a copy and paste from New Japan Wrestle Kingdom 14, beginning of 2020. Moxley beat Juice Robinson, and Suzuki came out very much the same thing. Walked out, tracksuit on, very similar. I believe the tracksuit was red instead of black that time. Mm-hmm. And then they had a fight just after the match with the commentators also going, is this happening now? Bonus match. And then they just had a fight. And then eventually they had a match at New Beginning 2020. This was like the last time when wrestling was kind of wrestling before everything got weird. But yeah, get ready for a similar match to the one that you saw tonight, because not tonight on the show, because it was 57-79 in terms of strikes in Suzuki's favor. Fouls galore, 12-11 in favor of Moxley. In this match, 25 strikes in the first minute shared between the two men. Kojima kind of decides to take it to another level with 28 strikes in 1 minute during this match. In the third minute, unreal. Kojima just struck Moxley 28 times just because he could.
Gareth in the chat, Suzuki made Mox look normal when they had a match, and Mox did not look normal. Suzuki's just that crazy. I think that's why Suzuki is over the way he is. And this is actually, Craig, you made the comparison that we might see a very similar match, and I think that's true in more ways than one. Let's take a look at the cumulative flow of offense. This is something that I would very much expect to see shared between the Suzuki and Kojima match, because you can see right around the 3-4 minute mark, Kojima's offense just absolutely shoots upwards, because what he's doing is he's trying to overcome Moxley, and Moxley is just starting to get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of strikes. And I think if the post-match brawl is any indication, that could be something that we see from Mox and Suzuki, which is that at some point, Minoru is just going to start trying to overwhelm Mox with all of these shots, and that's the sort of match that Mox tends to be in, because I really think, and I don't want to speak for him, but I really think that Jon Moxley likes to look tough, and he wants to prove that he is tough, and this is exactly how you do it. If just in a minute, offense just shoots up like this, and Mox is just absorbing strike after strike after strike, and then you still go another 8 minutes in the match. I think that's the kind of style that Moxley really likes to fight. And Suzuki, I mean, you tell the murder grandpa to give you 1,000 strikes in a minute. I think he's okay with that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see something that is very similar to this if we're talking cumulative flow. And Dan, Dan's absolutely right. He says Suzuki will start to go nuts after around 5 seconds. So it won't look at 3 to 4 minutes. It'll look like in the first minute, his offense just starts high. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar.
Yeah, Suzuki's a really interesting wrestler. He tends to just go for strikes and submissions. And he will. So he never dives, obviously. And sound like I'm talking about a football player. He never dives. Anyway, um, he essentially just goes for strikes, gets loads and loads of strikes, will hit probably just one grapple, and he often will never attempt to pin to the end of the match. There was a trend in last year's G1 where Suzuki would hit 1 or 2 grapples in the match, often just one, as he was hitting the pile driver to win the match. And he would essentially never go for a pin unless he had just hit the pile driver. So yeah, it's quite cool to see such a differentiated moveset. Like he's different from all the other wrestlers.
Speaking of the Koch pile driver, that really brings up the fact that they put over a great deal the training heritage of Minoru Suzuki, that he'd been trained by Billy Robinson in the Snake Pit and all of that. Yep. Just really very much my wheelhouse. Is like, oh, thank you, JR, for bringing all that stuff.
Yeah, you would know something about that.
Yes. Yeah, I've been researching training heritages quite a bit lately, and yeah, it was really nice to hear on the show. But even more so than that he uses the Gotch pile driver and all that. I don't know what it is about him. Crazy hairstyle, just everything. He just strikes you as the kind of person who spent their whole life doing everything so that there is no backup plan. I fight for a living. I could never do anything else. Like you see somebody on the street that has a face tattoo or whatever, just that says, I can't do a straight job. It has this menace and threat about him that I can't even put into words. That just puts him above the level of, the Kojima match was excellent.
Yep.
But it didn't have that anticipation that this one does because of just the menace and threat, the mystique that Minoru Suzuki brings.
It's such a great point. By the way, Dan is very disappointed that we will not see Minoru Suzuki do a shooting star press in that match. All I'm saying, stranger things have happened.
Never.
That's exactly.
Brock could do it. Why can't Suzuki?
Exactly.
Well,
good is relative. Yes.
Past tense.
One of the things that I really like when it comes to comparing these two matches, just from a character perspective, Kojima, one of the things that I found so funny was that a lot of people, and Kojima knew this, so he went on Twitter and said, a lot of people didn't know who I was until Jon Moxley cut a promo on AEW. So, hi, I'm Satoshi Kojima. I like bread, right? And that's his whole thing. Like, he seems like this genuinely nice dude. He has this gimmick on Twitter, and it's funny, and everyone loves it. But he walks in, and he's a badass, and he strikes like this. Minoru Suzuki has no such persona on Twitter. He's just an insane dude who loves to hurt people. And that's pretty much what Jon Moxley is. So, from a character perspective, the match itself could be very similar, but the character of how we see this going down could be very different, and it might be a step. I know that if Gareth is still here, I know that Gareth has talked a lot about this, about the potential of Jon Moxley maybe turning heel a little bit. This could be the kind of match where we see that happening, because at the end of the day, even though the mechanics may be similar, the character as Jon Moxley could lean into the sadistic, of going like, I can't keep this guy down, so I'm just, I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. I'm going to try to break his neck. I'm going to try to crush his esophagus. All of these things that he warned in this promo that he cuts on Kojima, we might actually see come to fruition a little bit in his match against Suzuki, again, just from a character perspective. SWG 88, interesting fact here, wrestling is one of the few sports that can be traced back to the beginnings of recorded history. It says there are cave drawings in France that are over 15,000 years old of people wrestling. I could very much see that. I mean, it certainly has its roots back in the original Olympics held in Greece. So, and it just goes to show you the evolution, and now we get on Dynamite Jon Moxley and Minoru Suzuki that basically have just removed the predetermined element from it. They're just going to try to go out there and hurt each other. I mean, that's the only thing. That's the only thing that I can come up with. He was there when wrestling was invented.
So I just want to go ahead.
Well, it's also really cool for people. So not everyone will have, not every AEW fan will have followed in the run up to AEW taking off, and the way that John Moxley put over when Suzuki was coming out was like you haven't really seen that from Moxley before. Like when he had to defend his title against Archer, he did that thing where he was like, "Oh, for sake, another big guy that just keep coming," and he kind of put him off. But there was an element of humor to it. He wasn't like scared. It was like, "Oh, heaven's sake." But then this time, as Suzuki comes out, it was like, oh no, no, not again type thing. And that's really not too much in Moxley's character. Even when he was against Jericho in the whole Inner Circle, he'd just like look at 5 of them, kind of shrug his shoulders and start swinging. But like, so he's really putting over Suzuki, and Suzuki was one of the guys that he really wanted to work with in Japan. So he's doing it for that reason. Yeah, it does really help, and people will laugh and call him the murder grandpa, but he's very old, and a lot of people watching will be like, who's this old man and why is Moxley scared of him? So for Moxley to put him over like that does, it does help counteract that.
Yeah, you make
that's good.
I was telling Greg he makes a fantastic point. By the way, Gareth with the scoop, Minoru Suzuki beat Georgios Samaras in the first ever Olympics in Athens in 776 BC. So thanks for the scoop there on that one, Gareth. I appreciate that.
All right. So I want to make a couple of points about what Craig said. That's absolutely true. That he puts over Minoru Suzuki, but he does it because the character fits. I mean, he wouldn't do that for anybody whose character didn't have that mystique already. Because it would make him look bad. But with Minoru Suzuki, it does not. It absolutely, if you have, first off, even some people may scoff, but he has that menace. It comes across immediately. So it's not, it doesn't harm Moxley to act like it. And show that fear, and that's one of the most amazing things that a wrestler can do for another wrestler. People criticize Triple H for a lot of things, quite rightly, but he did it exactly right when Mick Foley came out and said, "You're not going to be facing Mankind, you're going to be facing Cactus Jack," and this was another moment like that. And to what Griff said before, I don't know if I completely agree. I think that he can go as dark as he wants, and it won't be very dark because he's up against what he's up against. Minoru Suzuki is dirty and gritty, and they'll do everything to each other, and it won't be seen as going too far because they both are willing to go that far. It would have been more so against the Breadman because he definitely did give across that air of, I'm a tough fighter, but I'm an okay guy. I'm a nice guy. I loved their press conference thing that they did because it just came across as Moxley doing the whole just angry, grumpy thing he's been doing lately, and the New Japan fellow literally coming across as an anime protagonist. I will do my best.
You know what? You make a good point. So no arguments from me. I think either way, we are in for a treat, if you want to call it that. If you're into lots of men hurting each other and stuff like that. If you're into that, then you're in for a treat on Dynamite. Let's move on and talk about Britt Baker versus Chris Statlander. This match I thought was really, really good, and it really grew on me as the match went on. Not to say that I ever thought it was bad. It certainly was not. But the early stages of it, I was kind of waiting to be pulled into it, and then almost like a switch went off. Suddenly they started going absolutely nuts, and that's what really pulled me into the match. And what's so interesting, I want to take you first to the graph. We're going to start with the flow of offense graph here, and it was right at the 10-minute mark that or 9-minute mark rather, that I really started to get pulled in, which is so interesting because normally you get pulled into a match when it starts to get really competitive and you start to feel like, okay, well, anyone can win here. But for me, and I don't know if this was the same for you guys, that 9-minute mark, Britt Baker started just taking over, and you can see for the last 2.5 minutes of the match, Statlander got no offense in at all. But that's what really brought me into it, is that Baker went to this other place where she just started to take apart Statlander. You know, and it was on the outside, and she hit a stomp off the stairs, and then she hit the Pittsburgh Sunrise, which was huge, and I popped for that. She hit the stomp on the ring, you know, and it just builds to this crescendo of eventually getting the lockjaw and forcing Statlander to submit. This is a much different match style than I was expecting. It's not the kind of match that I would expect would have really pulled me in the way it did, but at the end of it, I was able to look back and say, you know what, I really, really enjoyed this match. So, Craig, when you look at this, I mean, did you feel the same way I did? Did you start to get pulled in at that 9-minute mark, or were you into it a little earlier than that?
I liked this whole match. I thought this match was made by Chris Statlander. I thought she was absolutely fantastic. She is ridiculously strong. That superplex, so they were going to do the superplex, and as she lifted up Britt Baker, Baker's strength gave out, and she went to a funny angle, so Chris Statlander had to essentially deadlift her and fall at the same time, which was incredibly impressive. Yeah, I thought she held the match together extremely well. And so you were saying that you came in around the 9-minute mark. That's kind of as Britt Baker was kind of having a comeback, which is an interesting way of looking at it, because Britt Baker has kind of gone through her title reign, and before that, cheating, even in the match against Red Velvet in Pittsburgh, where Red Velvet was playing heel and Britt Baker was, you know, she did a babyface speech afterwards, and in Pittsburgh it was like she was babyface for the night. Right. But she was still cheating all the time. Rebel was grabbing at Red Velvet's feet, and it was odd. And then in this match, Britt Baker didn't play it fully clean, but as we got to the end, she bested Statlander. She went over Statlander. It wasn't like Miro. It wasn't even like Omega. Baker was put over more cleanly than any of those other guys, which is odd when you've got Rebel on the outside still doing her heel shtick, and you've got the new heater Jamie Hayter there as well. I don't know. It was an interesting change of pace, and I don't know if they maybe are going to start moving in that direction that people have been clamoring for, because if you look at the flow of offense, that is a babyface heel match where the Baker's flow of offense there, starting hot, having a period where the other person's on top in the middle, and then coming back at the end, that's a kind of a babyface heel dynamic, just the wrong way around.
You know what? It's really interesting, because anyone who's listened to the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast before, you can say this one with me: Britt Baker's heel tendencies, it's a feature, not a bug. And so when it comes to the actual, I guess, mechanics of how Britt Baker is going to fight in the future, I think, do you go full bore and turn her babyface? In my opinion, no, because fans like her as a heel. That's one of the reasons why they like her so much. So, Craig, what you bring up puts them in a very interesting position, where you can see over that last 3 minutes of the match that Britt Baker basically made a babyface comeback. And, you know, as a heel, it's very weird how it works, but I think it does work solely because the fans are into it, right? And the fans got behind her for it. So the interesting thing, and this goes to what Dan has just said in the chat, you know, saying, you know, it might be worth a discussion about AEW's women's division as a whole, because this is the sort of thing that you see and say, clearly one of the most over acts in the company is the women's champion. But again, we're in this weird position where she's a heel, but she's over as if she were a babyface. So I don't know. It's very again, we're in this position where it's very odd, and this will lead into a discussion. I mean, we can basically combine the two, talking about the Casino Battle Royal, which, of course, Ruby Soho ends up winning. So now Ruby Soho is actually a very similar character because she is a heel for all intents and purposes in terms of how she wrestles and how she looks and, you know, how her character is, but the fans love her still. And so you're kind of, not to necessarily say she's going to be a heel in AEW, I'm just saying a lot of what we've seen of her has been as a heel. So I don't know.
She was very babyface. She was very babyface, like hugging Bryce Remsford after the.
That's
win.
true. That's true. I'm not saying that she will be a heel in AEW.
I think that's a bias on your part. That's a heel look. It's like, no, it's very much something that a lot of. I mean, that would be like saying that CM Punk has a heel look. It's like, no.
I don't know.
She was.
That could be a very effective babyface presentation.
I think it was more that she was a heel most of the time in WWE. Like, it's a lot of like gang beatdowns and stuff.
Not understanding what her actual heel is.
I don't.
Ruby Soho is obviously a babyface.
I'm not saying
a heel.
I'm not saying she will be a heel. I'm saying she has been a heel. The point is, you have these two acts who are very over, and it's going to be interesting to see how they really deal with it. I think Gareth is absolutely right in the chat that AEW, they don't seem to mind fans cheering certain heels. So he says that Baker has been cheered for the last year despite being a heel, and they haven't changed anything. And I absolutely agree with that. So again,
wouldn't they get slammed though if they were WWE? Didn't this exact same thing happen? Becky Lynch.
As far as, well, I mean, it seems to me as though like she was still a very similar character even through that whole run. Like she was, the only thing that changed with Becky is who she was fighting, and that's exactly what I've been advocating for Britt Baker this whole time. All that changed with Becky is that she was fighting Charlotte, who was an actual heel, and Ronda, who was an actual heel, and that meant that Becky could be a heel, but because she was so over, fans still cheered her as if she was a babyface, but she still did heel stuff, right? I mean, she still attacked people.
That's all true, but there wasn't it. They had Charlotte. They wanted Charlotte to be the face and Becky to be the heel, and then it all changed when, like, you're absolutely right, Becky was still behaving in the same way, but when they then, because the fans were so behind Becky, they eventually gave up on trying to have her heel, and Charlotte turned heel, and Becky, as you said, kept behaving as she had, but she was also like running down the fans for a while when they wanted her to be heel, and that kind of stopped. Baker doesn't do that anymore. I don't think she runs down the fans, if I'm not mistaken, but she used to, so that's an interesting kind of tweak.
Yeah, I think that I think you make a great point. I think that that's not necessarily like that. That's a typical heel tactic. Obviously, we see MJF, for example, do it all the time.
See, MJF.
So, well, and MJF
once or twice.
Look, MJF is over, but he's over as an actual heel, right? So that's really where the difference is. That he's over because fans boo him out of the building and they want to see him lose.
Yeah.
Baker is over because fans want to see her win. So if you want to just strip back the, let's not have her run down the fans, but she can still do all the same stuff. She can still cheat. She can still do all that stuff. I think, at least for now, it may be a short-term look. Fans might start to get bored with it at some point. But at least for now, I have no issue with them continuing that. So as far as Ruby Soho goes and how she integrates into all this, I think it's going to be very interesting because it's going to be the same thing. I mean, Statlander was the same, that she was really over when she returned. Fans still love her. And somehow the match against Britt Baker worked because what we actually saw was the fans were really they were kind of just cheering. Like, they just sort of cheered for everything. And I don't think you could do that all the time. But for Statlander, it worked. And I certainly think that for Ruby Soho, given how the fans reacted to her being the Joker, I think it could work for her. I think after that, now you need to really get into, how are we going to make this feud heel versus babyface, But I think for right now, as far as Ruby Soho being the next challenger, I think it can and probably will work the same way that we saw from Statlander. And I think Dan also brings up a good question about, what do you do on the back of this when he says, is this a boost in the wider women's division? There was a lot of really talented wrestlers that we saw in that battle royal. A lot of them I thought could have gone on and won it. So for it to be Ruby Soho, are you going to build something on the back of this, and who could be a legitimate next challenger for Britt Baker? I don't know. To me, that's an open question.
Sure. I mean, that's an amazing group of people, and they don't get enough time, and I think it would be difficult for them to get enough time on some levels. I've been looking at it, and just like right now, they're getting 2 matches out of approximately 9 per week. And it's getting to the point of, well, we could make it 3, but could we make it 4? 4 would be enough to tell all the stories we want, but that would be almost half. Some weeks it would be half, because there are some weeks where they have 8 matches, and they just you compare the men's roster to the women's roster, it just doesn't. It just doesn't. It wouldn't be warranted to give them 4. I don't know. I've heard people say, "Hey, maybe Rampage needs to be 2 hours because they need time to tell these stories." No, I agree. I love Rampage as it is, but I completely see the point of how are they going to fit in all the stories that they need to tell in order to really feature everybody who deserves to be featured, especially with all the people who have now joined them.
I think something's happening with Baker. Something's happened. This match was a big kind of departure from how she usually fights. So she did 2 dives in this. In all the statistics that were gathered before this match, in her almost 2 hours of 1v1 time this year, Britt Baker hadn't done a single dive, yet she did 2 in this match. She was also averaging 191 seconds of submission per hour. In this match, her submission, it was just about half of that, at 104 seconds per hour. So I don't know if they are changing her style or if it was just her meshing really well with Statlander. I don't think that necessarily has to be a face turn, but there has been a lot of conversation around Britt Baker in the ring since she came back from her injury. One of my favorite women's matches in AEW ever was the match which Britt Baker broke her nose in, the one with Hikaru Shida during the pandemic. So I was really excited to see Hikaru Shida versus Britt Baker too, and it was very disappointing in my opinion. And, the Nyla Rose match wasn't tremendous either. I really liked this one. I felt like it was Statlander's doing, us watching it, but now that I'm thinking of it and looking at the numbers, maybe they're tweaking Baker's in-ring style, moving slightly less submissions, a bit more high impact, or maybe it's the precursor to, I don't know if she's just going to go to more of a grey character, so she's still got the attitude, she still heals it up every now and again, but she's not like a proper heel. Or maybe it's just an in-ring style change, but it's really interesting that she did 2 dives in this match after doing none in an hour 55 minutes before this match.
I think.
Hey, Craig, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, first of all, Polar Knights just wants to remark about the evolution of beards that's going on here. So I do appreciate that. Also, Polar Knights, an OCD friendly podcast. I hope that's a comment about the numbers, but I don't know. Maybe it is about the beards. I don't know. Anyway, I appreciate that. I think. Oh, and Gareth actually brings up a good point here. He says Baker tends to need someone to lead matches, similar to Ospreay. She's great, but she doesn't tend to lead matches very well. It's an experience thing. So I could definitely see that. I think what is interesting about the way we're going to see with Britt is, I think we as wrestling fans tend to go into the black and white a little bit. There's heel and there's babyface, and you fit into one of these categories, and we're going to make it work. And I do think that you can't do it all the time. You can't live in the gray area, but you can have someone that does occupy that gray area. And to me, I'm not necessarily comparing Britt Baker to Steve Austin, But if you look at Steve Austin, if you just took the crowd reaction out of it and you just solely look at what he did during the Attitude Era, you would think this guy's the biggest heel in the company. Like the kind of stuff he did, if you just said he stunned an old man like 5,000 times during the Attitude Era, like that's the kind of stuff that Steve Austin did, but it worked because of the kind of characters they were and because of the way the fans were reacting. So I don't necessarily think you can do it with everyone. But if Britt Baker is just going to live in this area where she acts like a heel, she does her thing, and maybe they tweak her, like as you were saying, Craig, maybe they tweak her match style a little bit, a little less submissions, a little more high impact, like you were saying, they can do all that, and it can still work because Britt Baker plays the character that she plays.
It feels like that's how they're going. And 2021, like in the past when you had movies, it was all black and white. Not literally, but like the characters were good guys or bad guys. Mm-hmm. It's Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones. It's all, you don't need, people don't watch films or TV shows to get behind the good guy. It's, shades of grey, interesting characters, cheering the bad guy sometimes. So yeah, my theory is that they're just going to take her into a bit more of a shade of grey, and the fans can do what they want, and that will become cheering, I would guess.
Yep.
However, having Ruby Soho win the Battle Royale suggests that she will still probably occupy a heel role against her, because she was, at the end of that match, I don't know if it was spur of the moment, but the way that she was interacting with the crowd and all the rest of it, she was like as pure as spirits as can be, I would suggest.
Sure. Craig, you were looking at the overall stats and comparing them to the per hour rates for this match. What's Statlander's usual grapple? She was at 16 per hour for this match.
Yes. 59.
59 per hour is her usual?
Yes, 59. But before this match, she had taken part in four televised matches, with a total ring time of 21 minutes. 21 minutes for four matches, so that's four very small matches. So what will have happened is she'll have hit 2 or 3 grapples in each match, but that will have been exponentially ramped up.
Right.
So
No,
that's
I
not the
understand what you
best.
mean. She's using the same number of grapples in the course of a match. It's just a longer match. I just feel
Exactly,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's what it is. I mean, when you look at her stats, it seems as though her grapples collapse when she's in bigger matches or matches against higher profile people. But it could be that she's just used to using the same number of grapples in the course of a match, and those matches are, of course, the longer ones. So I've criticized her for this, but maybe I'm being too harsh, because she definitely did not come across.
She only
as
used 3,
not.
to be fair, in this.
Yeah, but I mean, you did point out that one of them was a really impressive strength showing one. So it's like, okay, that she's got that going for her.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find what she did last year. Because presumably, so last year, she took part in 2 traditional rules 1v1s on Dynamite or pay-per-view, and that was 38 minutes. 4 matches, 38 minutes, 22 grapples per hour, which is relatively high.
A little higher than what's the per hour rate was in this match,
16 in
but
this one.
not by a ton.
Yeah.
In wrestling, we sort of there's I guess a general progression of the way things go, and we tend to think that because things have been done a certain way in the past, that this is the way they will be done. And I think in the case of Britt Baker, to sort of tie together the whole discussion about her and Ruby Soho and everything about this, that because heels and baby faces tend to work in the past the way they have, that now this is how they must work now, and if you deviate from that, then it's not going to work as well. And I think what we're seeing from Baker and from Ruby Soho is that things don't necessarily have to work that way. And for Britt Baker, it really works, and I believe that for Ruby Soho, it is really going to work as well. But that doesn't just go for Britt, that doesn't just go for Soho, that doesn't just go for the women's division, that goes as well for MJF and Chris Jericho and this match. And this is something that I have been really, really excited to talk about.
I'm assuming we're circling back and we haven't forgotten the next match.
As far as... I mean,
so the next match on the card was the tag match. I'm assuming we're maybe coming back to that.
No. We're coming back. We're coming back. Don't worry about that. We're coming back.
Just checking because that's important.
No. We will come back. Don't worry about that. But I wanted to make this this transition because I wanted to talk about the way that we sort of see things currently and judge them based on what we've seen in the past. And the reason why it is applicable to Jericho and MJF is because of the dusty finish that we saw at the end of this. Now, it is the first dusty finish that AEW has done in my memory. I can't remember them ever doing one. So, this is the first. And it's very interesting because normally, and again, we get back into what we've seen in the past, a dusty finish is used to screw over a babyface. So a babyface wins, the heel does something, and then the match gets restarted and the heel wins. That's what we were used to seeing. Now in this match, the heel did something, and the heel won, and the finish comes where the babyface gets to restart the match, and the babyface goes on and wins. Normally, I would say this doesn't work, because the whole point is a heel is not supposed to look sympathetic. So the reason the dusty finish works is because it makes the babyface look sympathetic, it makes the heel look evil, and off to the races you go. In this particular one, it worked for one reason, and it's because the fans were behind this finish. The fans loved this finish. That from the second Jericho's foot was on the ropes, the fans started vocalizing. They started booing. And then when the other referee came out to say, I saw the foot on the ropes, the fans start getting into it. And it would not have worked. It is very possible that the fans could have turned on this and said, you know what, we're done with this feud, we're done with this match, we don't want this, and we're not going to have this. But no, the fans were absolutely 100% behind Jericho. They thought that he had been screwed over, and they wanted the match to be restarted. So credit to the fans in Chicago. They made this match, and it's AEW proving, like they did with Britt Baker, that Jericho, MJF, you can take these historical things like a dusty finish and you can modernize them, and it really works as long as you know what you're doing. That's the finish. The match itself, I liked. I enjoyed the match. It's old school stuff. MJF is a great heel. And the finish to me just absolutely made this match. Sergi, what do you think about this?
I mean, it was a good match. I enjoyed it. I'm not too surprised by how it turned out. I'm surprised that they did a restart, but I think it was effective. I'm pretty sure that if we did a little bit of history searching, that you could find that although the dusty finish that you're describing was the most common thing with a restart, that there are plenty of examples going back to, as far back as you like, to the 70s, the 60s, whatever, of using the restart in benefit of the babyface. The thing that I think that is important about that is that it did not put sympathy on the heel. The sympathy was still on the babyface of he was almost screwed.
Right.
But then they caught the injustice just in time, and that's the kind of thing that wrestling fans are going to bite on. Like, yes, finally we got our injustice reversed. As we're talking about the very similar with the cage match that we're going to talk about soon. The traditional. I think that a big part of it is that people have gotten used to over the last 10, 15 years, 20 years of a an authority figure, or the authority figures of the wrestling show, the most common wrestling show, being heel figures, and that the authority figures put obstacles and problems in place of the baby faces, where that's not what AEW does at all. AEW does a much more traditional Jack Tunney kind of a thing, where the heels are putting the obstacles in place, the heels are causing the injustices, and once in a while, an authority figure will try to even the scales a little bit, as they did with making it a cage match, or as they did with the refs just coincidentally being on hand for other reasons, and noticing the ref in charge's error, and pointing it out to them just in time to restart the match. I think that was the big thing, was people were, or that's one aspect that people were like, I know people were questioning, like, is this opening a can of worms? Are we going to have instant replay? It's like, no, this is a very specific situation where there happens to be another ref who was able to see and convince the ref in charge to reverse their decision in time. It's not like you can. Apparently, there was a match on Raw that was restarted later in the night, and that's not a restart. That's just a rematch. But right at that time, when the ref calls the decision, they can reverse themselves and restart the match. It's just there's a tiny window of time where that can happen, according to the general history of how wrestling matches have gone in the past.
Yeah. I think Gareth brings up a good point here. He says the restart benefiting the babyface has definitely been done quite a lot, but it needs a good heel for it to work. The fans have to be into it. MJF really made that, and I absolutely agree. I think this is I think MJF operates on such a high level as a heel that I think a lot of us tend to forget actually how good he is, because he just we've seen it in traditional sports a lot, that people make the game look so easy that you forget how difficult it really is. So like, people used to talk about this with Kobe Bryant a lot, which is that he made basketball look so easy that people forgot that most people can't play it like that. And I think MJF is the same with being a heel, that he makes being a heel look so easy that we forget that most people, almost no one in the world, can do the kinds of things that MJF does as a heel, and generate the sort of heat that he generates, and gets the reaction of people to be exactly what he wants it to be. Because I really believe they were towing a very fine line with this finish. And I think MJF is such a big reason why the fans got into it the way they did.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, because I think that like a Dante Martin is an example of someone who makes things look so easy you can't believe that, but for MJF, it's like, yes, you could say that he makes being a heel look easier than it is, but also he is so good at it, you forget that he's doing it on purpose. You get to the point of you just think you actually hate him. Like, no, he's a performer doing a job. I'm supposed to hate him. That's him doing his job. This is not real,
Exactly.
Also, partially because he doesn't go out of character, or claims that he's never in character.
Which I love, by the way. I love the commitment there. But you make a great point about this, because the perfect example of this is during this entire feud. He constantly, in every single promo, he brings up Jericho. He brings him up by name. He either says Chris or he says Christopher every time. And I'm like, the last few months, I just get so viscerally annoyed by it. And I actually have to remind myself that that's the point. Like, I'm supposed to be annoyed by him doing that. And again, it's one of those things that, like, if you just said, this guy brings up this guy's name all the time, like, that shouldn't be anything, but for MJF it is, and it makes me want to see him lose. And again, that's the whole point. And when we get into the mechanics of this match, I want to compare it to something like, for example, say, what am I thinking of? Starrcade 97. Tuba, hey, what's up, buddy? By the way, thank you. I turned the soundboard off because we're talking all the time, so that's why you can't hear it. If you're talking about Starrcade 97, Hogan versus Sting, the whole point of that is people want to see babyface Sting finally give it to heel Hogan, and he didn't really, right? He kind of got his ass kicked the whole match. This match, from a statistical perspective, as we're looking at it right now, Jericho outdoes MJF in strikes, in strikedowns, 2-1, basically. 61% of the match offense. Constantly reversing MJF, 27% reversal rate. This is exactly what you wanted to see from this match, because Chris Jericho is whooping MJF's ass. And that's what we wanted to see, a babyface destroy a heel like this, and then the heel thinks that he has the match won by cheating, by using Floyd, and he actually doesn't, and the match goes in favor of the babyface who submits him. To me, when you're talking babyface versus heel, from a numbers perspective, this is exactly what you want to see.
So I think the Dusty finish was done almost like as a threat to the fans to kind of multiply how relieved they were when Jericho actually won. So it was like, here's your worst nightmare. Oh no, it's actually all right. They've caught it. Then they're euphoric at the end. I think that this whole thing is pretty rubbish. So I thought it was all going to be okay. So Chris Jericho came out to a weird rendition of Judas, which was too loud to hear the fans singing. But he had like tears in his eyes. It was like, right, so he's really doing this. He's really doing this. He wants his legacy to be, I'm the opposite of all those other guys. I'm not Triple H. I'm not Hulk Hogan. I'm not taking all the glory for myself. Mm-hmm. I'm putting these guys over, which is, it's like a smarter version of glory. The Blood and Guts match was all about the Inner Circle taking apart the Pinnacle. Remember the Pinnacle? They were a thing. Pinnacle didn't get much in that match. It finished with MJF, getting one over on Jericho. Throughout the whole feud, the Inner Circle got more over the Pinnacle than the other way around. The only thing that this has had going for it is the MJF was kind of one step ahead of Jericho himself. It wasn't the Pinnacle were beating the Inner Circle. It was the MJF was beating Chris Jericho. However, within all that, Chris Jericho kind of ran through a bunch of guys on Dynamite. He got all these spotlight matches on Dynamite. They weren't always very critically well received. I personally thought the Shawn Spears match was really interesting, and the Nick Gage match served it was like an interest match. It was something very, very different.
Yeah.
The Juventud Guerrera match kind of fell apart. The Wardlow match was a bit odd. So it was a lot of Jericho, and if this was like his hits, he's on his way out, he's doing all these things because he's going to give his career to MJF, then, you know what, cool, take those things, and then MJF can say for the rest of his career that he's the guy that retired Chris Jericho, and that's very MJF. That's a heck of a thing to give somebody, especially the way they're treating MJF. That kind of made sense. But then for Jericho to win the match, what does he do now in AEW? He's kind of like, I loved his title reign. I thought it was great. I thought everything to do with him in the first 6 months of AEW was fantastic. But I know with Jericho, I've seen enough of him. I don't like Stone Cold cosplay Jericho, and I think that MJF really should have won this match.
I certainly understand where you're coming from with that, and Dan actually in the chat, something that he said earlier, and now he's agreeing with what you said. But Dan, feels as though the feud should have ended here, that the fifth labor should have been this match at All Out. MJF wins and retires Jericho, which coming in, I also thought should have been the case if Jericho was going to retire. I am taking this as a sign that Jericho, there is a plan for him. Because, again, for 2.5 years of AEW, they don't just do things just to do them. So, they wouldn't have given Jericho a retirement match and then had him win just so that he can do nothing on AEW. To me, there must be a plan here. And this match I really enjoyed because I really like Jericho as a babyface. I understand that is like a lot of people, it's very it varies a lot based on who you are. You know, some people like Jericho as a babyface, some people don't. I get it. I personally like him as a babyface, so if there is a plan for him, I'm okay with that. But I certainly understand the perspective, and Dan brings up that, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a retirement. You know, it could have just been the fifth labor was here, and MJF gets the win. So I certainly understand that Jericho winning sort of feels like it's going backwards a little bit. I think that as a standalone match, this was great, and I think they gave me every chance to believe that MJF was going to win and retire Jericho. It got me on board with saying Jericho's not done yet, and there's going to be something else for him. So I maybe, and I'm just throwing this out there, I'm just speculating, maybe they feel MJF doesn't need the rub of retiring Jericho or sending Jericho away or whatever, that they feel like MJF is going to be fine no matter what he does. So they're saving this, you know, retiring, maybe it's not retiring Jericho, but sending Jericho away for some time. Maybe they're saving that for someone else that they feel like needs a bigger rub than MJF. I'm just speculating.
Daniel Garcia.
Maybe it is Garcia. It might be Wardlow. I mean, I don't know who it is, but it might be someone, is what I'm saying. I'm just speculating.
I don't think anybody really wants to see him do another retirement match, or that's something they're going to revisit anytime soon. I think that basically the retirement thing was just intended to establish the stakes, you know, and the stakes were there because it would be very credible that Jericho might be interested in retiring at this time. That they may consider MJF winning a retirement match against Jericho being that makes sense. That makes sense as a possibility. Because it makes sense as a possibility, you bite on it as a dramatic thing. Even though that they weren't actually going in that direction. And I think that's basically all it was there for, was to be credible stakes. You know, if you could have, like, Cody could have a retirement match and no one would bite on it because nobody believes he's really going to retire. You know, that's why I think that it was really there, was just it gave it more stakes, and so I think that we shouldn't we should try not to get too caught up in why didn't MJF win. It was like, well, Chris Jericho isn't retiring actually, but he thought that you might believe that he might, and therefore this made sense as a stakes raising gambit.
Yeah, and I certainly did bite on it. I think really the blunder, if there was one, is that they had a match in, you know, during the final labor of Jericho that MJF won. So my only issue with this was, how do you justify a rematch? I think they did a fine job. I think you could have done a better job, but ultimately, I personally did not have an issue with the way this went. That and I can only speak for myself. So I think if you had an issue, I know Craig had an issue, Dan has an issue. I think, you know, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. Wrestling is very subjective. Art is subjective. So if you didn't like it, you didn't like it. I hope that if you're listening, you can get both perspectives on it, you know, and see where we're all coming from people who liked it and people who didn't like it as much. One thing I want to say, Gareth in the chat asking if there's room for Jericho with guys like Punk, Cole, Bryan coming in. It's a fair question. I don't know where Jericho necessarily fits in. What I do know is, as a character, Jericho is still top level. I mean, he is still elite in that sense, in my opinion. So has he lost a step physically? Yes. But can he still tell a story physically? Absolutely. And that's what I saw in this match. So the one thing I will say is to push back against Gareth, saying that Gareth said, I don't want to see him get to the point where fans resent him, but that's starting to happen. I disagree. I think you look at the Chicago fans, I don't think there was resentment at all in there. I think every single fan, 10,000 fans, bit on Jericho and they were cheering and wanted Jericho to go into that match. I'm aware that fans could start to resent him at some point. And so AEW should be aware of that. But as of right now, I don't think it's happening. And I believe that they have something for Jericho to do, and that's why Jericho isn't retired yet. That's my assumption. But 2.5 years of history in AEW, gives me belief that they wouldn't just have Jericho go out and do this without some sort of plan for him going forward. This is one of your biggest stars. So
if you want to think about a possible future for Jericho, look at Sting. I think that's where his transition happens. He could have transitioned. He could have lost this match if he had decided he was done in ring. He's had some great matches in the last few weeks, so I can see why he would say, no, why should I be done? But he could transition, instead of transitioning like if he had lost the match, to a pure I'm just an announcer now kind of thing. He could transition into a role where he is, instead of the leader of the Inner Circle, he could be a mentor who sometimes fights like Sting is for Darby. And that could be a great role where he's wrestling less often because they don't need him to wrestle as often because, like you said, they've got all these new stars that they need time to feature.
So he can join the AEW Dads division with Taz and Sting and 2.0 somehow.
I don't know why they're dads. They just want to claim people as their son.
Yeah, they're acting like it.
But I wouldn't consider Taz to be in the same level as those guys because he doesn't fight anymore. He's not able to fight anymore. Taz is on the same level as Arn Anderson Tully. Or somebody who, Tully. Although Tully did have one off match. Isn't that weird? They brought him back for one match. But anyway, but there are...
Taz choked out Cody once.
Exactly. But he hasn't had a full match. But besides... well, you never know. But besides Sting and possibly now Jericho, you've also got... guys like Dustin, and to some extent Billy Gunn, who still go often enough, but are not considered. They're considered like they're our dad division now. They're not. Yeah. We don't expect them to be what they once were.
Yeah. Garrett says in the chat he'd like to see the Inner Circle become more about Sammy and Proud and Powerful than it is about Jericho. And I think really this feud, I think that's where we're going towards, because Sammy is still over. He's doing his thing. People are still they're still gonna love seeing him. I think this feud was not Inner Circle versus Pinnacle. I think this particular feud was Jericho versus MJF, and the setup was Inner Circle versus Pinnacle that happened leading into Blood and Guts and everything else that we saw. So if we're gonna get back to Inner Circle as a group, then I agree with you. It should be about Sammy Guevara. It should be about Proud and Powerful, and what do you do with them? And maybe those trios titles will come around at some point, and that's something that can be done with the Inner Circle. Jericho's out there being their mouthpiece. I think all of this is to say that for all the discussion about maybe Jericho should have just hung him up because where does he go from here? I think what we're showing is there are potential directions for Chris Jericho to go from here. He's not stuck. There are things for him to do. Whether or not that will be good for you, that I can't answer that question. We'll just have to see what happens. But there certainly are ways that AEW can go with Jericho. The last 30 minutes of this podcast has really been about taking historical and putting it in the modern, from Britt Baker to the Dusty finish, everything in between. But what I'd like to transition to now is something that there is no historical precedent for, because we have never ever seen something like this before, and that was Lucha Brothers versus Young Bucks in the steel cage. Now, it's hard to say that this match exceeded expectations because I'm not quite sure how to actually define my expectations for this match. Like, there aren't words for how good I expected this match to be. I just knew that it was going to be good and that I was going to enjoy it. So that certainly did happen, and this match certainly was so good that I wonder if AEW should ever have a cage match again, because it's never going to reach this level. And the crazy thing about this was, it wasn't even like there was part of me that expected half the match to be fought like on top of the cage, like with Rey Fenix just running around doing laps, and him and Nick Jackson, like the finish would be a Spanish fly from the top of the cage or something. Like, that's part of me is what is expected that. And we didn't necessarily get all of the ridiculous cage spots. I mean, we got a lot of ridiculous spots. Don't get me wrong, but you can see that like the strength of this match was just in how active it was. You're talking about a 20-minute match that had nearly 200 strikes, that had over 20 strikedowns, that had 38 grapples, that had 16 dives. Like, this match it was so active. It never stopped. It never, like, nothing ever seemed to be able to finish this match. Like, I don't know what else to say. This match was so great. I loved every second of it. And if you haven't seen it already, first, again, why are you here? But if somehow you've ended up here and you haven't seen it, go watch it. And Craig, we're looking at the numbers right now. What did you think about this match?
I'm just thinking about what you were just saying there about how we were all expecting Nick Jackson and Rey Fenix to have some kind of jousting match on top of the steel cage. And then I was thinking, well, like, why was this match good then? If they didn't do a huge amount of that, why was it steel cage? And I think it was the penning in aspect. Like, they could have just done a tornado tag, but the steel cage made it like feel very close. Yeah. And they were essentially like bouncing off the steel cage every now and again, that the match threatened to kind of leave the ring, which perhaps was it. It was used as a weapon and stuff as well. But I think that was the function of the steel cage, which is interesting. Same way that War Games was used in WCW, which is also kind of where WWE has gone wrong with the steel cage in War Games, is they always use it as a stunt show rather than something that pens it in and things become kind of fierce and kind of contained.
Yeah.
In terms of this match, it was just like, this match is currently the #1 rated match ever in AEW on the Grapple app. And I know it's only a few days after it's taken place, but the former match that took that place was the other famous tag team match. So that has a rating of 4.8, and this match has a rating of 4.82. So that's very close. But this match has 549 ratings. The other tag match has 1,100. So this match looks like it might, and give it a month or two, this might be the best rated AEW match ever, which is it. I don't feel like I've not really been I only watched a lot of this today, so I've not seen a huge amount of the social media response to this. But after the other Young Bucks tag match with Kenny Omega and Adam Page, that felt like it had been universally received as like one of the best things that AEW had ever done. I don't know if this has quite had that reaction. Like, I know it's, fantastic, best of the year kind of match of the year, but I don't know if people are saying it's the greatest thing that AEW have ever done. I think it's probably my favorite AEW match. I would have to think about that. But yeah, those are some crazy ratings.
It's hard to contextualize this because wrestling matches, you can love wrestling matches for such different reasons. So it's hard to say this is the best match AEW ever put on, because if you're into physical storytelling, this match had a little bit of that. It's not the greatest physical storytelling match that has ever been done, but I mean, even then, like, they did, you know what? Forget what I said. This is the best match I think AEW has ever put on. I'm going to say it right now. That's my opinion. Because I think it did have everything. I'm trying to think about what it didn't have. It had ridiculous high spots. It had ridiculous spots that weren't so high, but it's exactly like what we were talking about earlier with Dante Martin, which is just that these guys do things that you're like, how is that even possible? Like, how can they actually do it? It doesn't seem like it should be that hard, but if you went and actually tried it, it would absolutely be that hard. It was brutal. It had some color. It had a lot of emotions, like Penta diving in front of Rey Fenix to take the thumbtack shoe to the face, and then the thumbtack shoe being given back to the Young Bucks. I mean, like, it had everything, and then to culminate all of that, it had a finish that I really did not see coming. I really didn't think the Lucha Brothers were going to win this match. I was convinced that the Young Bucks would lose the title in New York. And Gareth agrees with me in the chat that Gareth, I'm sure you typed that up before I just changed my mind about how there was actual physically storytelling. Gareth said it was so fast paced that it was hard to keep up with the story, which, I mean, in my opinion, at times, yeah, but at times it was all story. I mean, you take a look at this at the flow of offense graph, and I just want to look at this, that if you see basically between 7 and 15 minutes, that was entirely story. That match slowed down, and it was all about the story. And I love that, because you need that in a match that's this long. You can't just have high spot, high spot, high spot, high spot for 23 minutes. It's not going to work like that. And they didn't, and they really delivered something special, in my opinion. Sergi, you know, I don't know if you want to get into where this match ranks all time in AEW. I don't know if that's a conversation that is worth having, but from your perspective, I mean, just how would you contextualize this match? Is this one of your favorite matches ever? Is this one of the best AEW matches ever? I mean, how do you place this match among all the great ones that AEW has done?
You're right that that's very difficult, just because of recency bias and all kinds of things. It's very hard to say, like, in a year, will I still look back on this as one of my favorite matches? I think I will. But at the same time, I also don't feel any advantage to, like, literally ranking matches. It's like, you know, it is a great match. It is unquestionably a great match. It was the match of the night, certainly. I mean, it has some pretty tough competition on that, for me, from Darby versus Punk. But a lot of people would disagree with that and not consider that to be all that close, because it's a matter of styles. I mean, you know, if you're more into, I mean, here's the thing that I would say is the biggest thing to say in favor of this match. That's not my kind of match. Darby versus Punk, that's my kind of match. I like, you know, a very strong story match, you know, the two guys and you know, their characters, and you know, this is a crazy balls to the wall spot fest tag match, and the way you're describing it, a lot of people would say, I'm not going to bother to watch that. And no, watch it anyway. You know, if this is not your usual kind of match, if you don't usually like that kind of match, watch this and see how they rise above that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say that really kind of contextualizes it, I hope. For anybody who's not like a big Spot Fest fan.
I think that is one of the best things that can be said about a match like this, because this is my kind of match. I am a high spot guy. One of the things that drew me into wrestling was the athleticism of so many of these wrestlers. And it's a big reason that I got drawn into AEW early on, because they were showcasing the Young Bucks and the Lucha Brothers. And one of my favorite matches of all time before this, may have been my favorite AEW match ever, was the ladder match between the Bucks and the Lucha Brothers. And so for me, it's easy to say I love this match because this is my kind of match. But I think you bring up something so valuable, which is that even if you don't tend to like this type of match, this match is going to give you things that normally these spot fest kind of matches don't give you, and this really excelled in that. I want to say
specifically. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Specifically, the spot with Penta getting between Matt Jackson and his brother, just was an amazing character moment. Yep. Because I mean, the Jacksons have done a fantastic job of getting over the idea that they are just these absolute annoying schmucks, like the worst, like heels in a completely non-wrestling context of just the kind of person is just. Yeah. But Lucha Bros, on the other hand, have mostly just been these cocky guys. And they've not shown that softer side, and it was amazing to see that. Of, these aren't just two tough guys who fight well. This is an older brother and a younger brother, and they love each other, and that means something. And it brought a whole different perspective to the match that it was really amazing.
Yeah. Gareth agrees with you in the chat, says we saw so much more character from the Lucha Brothers in this match, and that was his favorite thing about it. Absolutely. Getting to see Penta's family and him
too.
celebrating with them after the match, that was great. And especially, and this is something that I wasn't even really thinking about during the match consciously, but I know that it played a factor, is that, we're not even a year removed from these two looking like they were going to break up as a team, that Eddie Kingston was trying to get in between them and break them up, and it certainly seemed as though there was enough tension that was going to happen. And you go from that to Penta taking thumbtacks to the face to protect Phoenix, and then we get a moment like this. I worked myself into a shoot in a way, because I really believed that it was going to be Proud and Powerful winning it in New York, and as emotional as that would have been, I think that there's a lot of other things that can happen in New York that will be emotional like that. This was not something that I expected, and for that reason, it really got me on an emotional level, because I wasn't expecting to see this, and specifically to see the Lucha Brothers win. The one thing that I do want to say as well, that a lot of people are treating as a foregone conclusion, that once you bring up the steel cage is designed to keep people out, once you bring that up, it's like, okay, so someone's getting in, right? That's how, and because all we've known is WWE, and I look, I'm going to be that guy. WWE has ruined this for everybody, because they do these matches and they say the steel cage is so that nobody gets in, and then someone gets in every time. And AEW is here to remind us that actually a steel cage is so that nobody gets in, and no one got in. And that's the whole point of the steel cage. And I said that was going to happen. No one believed me. I said no one was going to get involved in this match. So that's all I'm saying. And I do love that part of it, because this fight should have been just the Lucha Brothers versus the Young Bucks. And so the steel cage did what it was supposed to do. On that level, on a kayfabe level, and also on the level that Sergi mentioned, which is you keep this match so close and really get that emotional feeling that probably wouldn't have existed if you just did a normal tornado match.
That was Craig.
Oh, that was Craig. I'm sorry. That was Craig's point.
On the other hand, their buffoon did manage to get them weapons, which was a pretty fun little bit.
I like that. I'm okay with that. I don't really consider that being like someone getting really involved. I think someone getting involved is like if someone had climbed the cage and come back down on the other side, which is kind of what we're used to seeing. Just sliding weapons through the chains.
The other aspect of that is just that he could have just left it on his foot. But, he had to take it off and use it as to punch with, which then put it into play. And once a weapon's in play, anybody can use it. And therefore, it's not really tipping the balance.
Yep. You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right.
I've just been having a look at the flow of offense for this. And what's really interesting about this match is until you get to about the 16th minute, this match is it's a seesaw match to the extreme. When one of the teams is on the offense, the other team essentially gets like zero offense for that minute. So it's very topsy-turvy for the first 8 minutes. It's the Lucha Bros are getting in a huge amount of offense, and then the Bucks are, and back and forth. And then the Bucks have this period where they dominate for about another 8 minutes. And then all of a sudden, around 15 minutes, the match completely changes, and it's far more of a struggle. So from about 16 minutes onwards, that's when you see a lot more of the trading of stuff. You get the eventual really, really cool kind of super kick off, which ends with that class. It looks like Matt Jackson's won it, and then Phoenix nips up and super kicks him, which I thought was amazing.
Man, that was so cool.
So towards the end of the match, it's more like they're more struggling. There's the differences between the offense for each minute is closer, whereas up until that point, it's like 100% of the offense, or 90% of the offense, or 80% of the offense in each minute goes to one of the two teams. Whereas in the last 6-7 minutes, it's like 60% or 70% goes to one of the teams and so forth.
And you see that bared out in the cumulative flow of offense as well, which is because the Lucha Brothers had the advantage over that first opening stages of the match. They were so far ahead in cumulative offense, and then right at that period where the Young Bucks started to take over, the Lucha Brothers offense cratered, and that's where the Young Bucks actually got the advantage in total offense. And then it wasn't until the very end of the match the Lucha Brothers switched the momentum by winning that super kickoff, and then in the last minute and a half, that's where the Lucha Brothers finally took over on offense, and they end up having more offense overall than the Young Bucks. And the last thing I want to bring up, by the way, big offense. You can see it in the corner. You can see that combined, these two teams had what?
Oh,
I got to do my math here. 94 big offense, right? 84. That is ridiculous, because when you talk about big offense, and again, I want to, big offense is basically the spots that you remember, right? That's always how we tend to think about it, is those sort of things that, beyond just simple strikes, it's really things that you remember: strike downs, grapples, dives, that kind of stuff. To have 84 of those moments in 22 minutes, I mean, it's like, in the hands of anyone else, that would have been way too much. The match would have been moving way too fast. You couldn't have been able to sell anything. You can't get that storytelling involved. And that's actually why a lot of people don't like matches like this, because there tends not to be a lot of selling. There tends not to be a lot of storytelling physically. And in any other team's hands, that would have been the case here. But I think these two teams are so good, they're so talented, that they're able to make it work. 84 big offense spots in 22 minutes. These teams made it work. I think very few could have done that.
For contrast, in the other long match, Christian Omega, there was only 31 in total.
Wow.
Obviously a sizable gap.
And that one worked as well. We are getting down to the wire on this one, but if you weren't into a big spot fest match, how about a really slow, really grinding kind of match? Slow that's not the connotation I want to give it. This is much more than just a slow match. CM Punk versus Darby Allin. This was not slow. This was it was deliberate. It was storytelling heavy, and matches like this tend not to be my thing, but if it is your thing, like it is for Sergi, I think this very much worked for you. So Sergi, I'm going to turn it over to you first. Take us through this match. Tell us, from the perspective of someone who really loves matches like this, what was special about this one?
Well, this is CM Punk's return match. He's coming back after years away, in front of his hometown crowd. Just the atmosphere was amazing. That's your setting. I mean, you've got that to begin with,
Right?
And then you have two guys who, you've got Darby Allin, and Darby Allin, CM Punk basically promised, you're going to get something special in this match, and people took that to mean, and I know I took that to mean, we're going to get some big spots, some crazy stunts. That's one of the ways that they could have made this really special. It's not the one that they chose. That would have been the easier way to make this a really special match. And they said, we're going to do a really traditional storytelling old school match, and we're going to convince you that that's what you want, that's here's the steak, not just the sizzle. This is what you want, and they put that over and just did an amazing job of it. It's not as though there were no spots. CM Punk took the took the tope, the suicide dive that he had mentioned in reviews that he wasn't looking forward to taking, because he's seen how very devastating that looks, and he did take that move. Just there were some amazing moments of storytelling. There's been something going around Twitter of comparing the first spot of the match, the very small spot, not a high spot, a low spot, as you might call it, just a regular old what's that throw called?
Just a judo toss?
Yeah, the toss. wrestlers usually call it something different, but yes, yeah, that toss that Darby does to CM Punk, and CM Punk does just a little reaction face to it, and all through Twitter, people have been comparing it to a very similar reaction face that Bret Hart gives to 1-2-3 Kid back in the day, and
I think
that's
actually
an example.
people have gone and found that I think I've seen something like 6 or 7 specific spots in this match were taken from that Hart versus 1-2-3 Kid match. I haven't gone back and looked at any of them, but that's what I've seen.
That's interesting. That's stealing is the highest form of flattery. No doubt about it. Homage, but for sure. And another example of that is the fantastic reaction he has to avoiding the coffin drop with the sit up. It's just a fun moment. I love this match. There's only one thing that could have made this match better. There's this comic book that I read with the what do you call it? The comedy characters have this saying: "Any plan where you lose your hat is a bad plan." And I just feel like any show where you have CM Punk in Chicago coming back after 7 years, and that's not your main event, go back to the drawing board until it is. I understand why they made the choice they did, but I just feel like that those were based on choices that you made, and we could have made different ones. I get that you want Danielson versus the Elite to be a story you're setting up, but I go back to like Christian versus the Elite, or Christian versus Kenny. They set that up and put it in their back pocket for weeks and weeks. There's no reason why Danielson couldn't have come out and had a stare off with CM Punk at the end of the night. That would have made a better show for me. But I don't want to rain on anybody else's parade. I get that people love this show exactly as it was, and I'm just saying I wish that CM Punk had been the main event, and that's the only thing that I wasn't happy with about this match. Was I felt like, oh, why wasn't this in the main event? Although I will give you that when when Adam Cole came out, it definitely gave me the reaction that I think they were looking for of, oh really, this guy? This is the surprise that made Punk not the main event. I feel like QT Marshall versus Paul White was put on after this, basically to gather up any heat that the crowd may have had for why the hell wasn't our hero the main event, to that and not to the main event itself.
Oh yeah, it was Paul White QT Marshall was a cool off for sure. It's funny, I actually had a much different reaction to Adam Cole. Mostly because, we're so plugged in with the internet wrestling community that when Cole came out, I was almost more excited for him than I was for Danielson, because Danielson I knew about, and I didn't know about Cole. So I actually figured that because Britt Baker had done the Pittsburgh Sunrise, that's where Adam Cole was going to come out. And so when he didn't, I figured, okay, so he's not coming. And so when he did, it actually popped me a lot, because I didn't think he was coming. That's all beside the point. I absolutely understand what you're saying, Sergi. From a match perspective, though, I'm not sure if this is the kind of match that could necessarily main event a show. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just not sure if it is. And I want to take a look at the flow of offense, because I think this really, in a lot of ways, it really shows how methodical this match was. And from a storytelling perspective, this works in a lot of ways. But in a main event, you've built your fans up to a crescendo, and there were definitely points of this match that I feel like you don't like. There were points of this match where I wouldn't say the fans died, but they were just waiting for that thing to happen for them to get back into it. And I think that was the design of the match. But, I think this match was carried because fans loved seeing CM Punk. I think if two other guys had done this match, I don't think it would have worked. But I think fans loved seeing CM Punk, and they loved it. They just were basking in the glow of him being out there. And there's something to be said for, saying, look, we're only going to give you a couple spots where you can where you would really start going nuts. And so because of that, those spots just by definition are going to mean more. And so, CM Punk doing the go to sleep taunt and calling for that, fans were so into that because you only got a few of those times to really be into it. So and to me, I'm cool with that. I'm cool that that's what they gave us. In my opinion, there was too many submissions. That was the only thing I would say. There was too many rest holds. There was too much of that kind of stuff. It started. There was a point right around the 7-minute mark. It started to feel like a WWE match to me, where really, I understand that's unpopular. It's going to be unpopular for people to hear. I get it. But I'm only speaking from my perspective. I'm watching this. I'm just like, this is not going anywhere. No one's going to submit to this. Like rear chin lock after rear chin lock. No one is submitting to this. In the context of the greater story, it did serve a purpose. So it's certainly not bad. But they went a little bit too far with it, where I lost interest in that particular point. They got my interest back. But in that particular point, I did lose interest. I have to admit.
So just did some quick maths. From the beginning of the 6th minute to the beginning of the 9th minute, CM Punk had Darby Allin in submission holds for 106 of the 180 seconds there. So that's, that does back up your point. That's quite a lot.
It's a little much for me. If it may not be for you, that's totally fine. I'm just speaking from my perspective. It was a little much.
I thought this was more about I thought this was more about spots this match than I don't think they really got the flow. So there was the spots at the beginning where Punk was a bit confused. I thought the lack of him being able to reverse out of Darby Allin's hammerlock was terrific. Then there was the spot where he GTS'd Allin out of the ring. There was a really cool spot where Darby Allin slingshot himself into the ring post for Punk. That was incredible.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Darby Allin also did a nuts swanton from the inside to the outside onto a standing Punk, which looked crazy again. But the standard Suicida dive that Darby always does.
Yep.
The Last Supper tease of Allin winning, which is an established finishing pin now for Allin. So
I think that's the first person to ever kick out of that.
Might be. Yeah. And then the cool kind of Punk sitting up out of the coffin drop.
Yep.
Also, they've stopped calling everything a coffin drop, which is really good. They've started calling it the coffin splash in this match, which is good, because they kept just calling it the coffin drop, and it's like, well, it's different. Anyway, this to me was actually a spot fest, kind of, but not in the way that people usually think, because it didn't. I feel like they didn't get the flow quite right, and it's Punk's first match back. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was great, but it was because of the dynamic of Punk. I'm interested in that whole Bret Hart thing. I'd heard about the beginning bit, but to me, taking 6 or 7 things from a match that's not like being inspired by another match. That's kind of copying its homework a little bit to me. So I've not seen that. I hope it's a bit more magpieing rather than just, ooh, this is good, let's do that. That would be a bit much for me. But,
I don't want to comment on it. That's what I saw. Garrett did put in the chat that Bret Hart is Punk's idol, so maybe it was a function of that. I'd have to go actually look and see the spots compared to each other. I just saw that's
Fair
what
enough.
had been said.
I completely agree with most of what Craig's saying there. Absolutely, it was built around moments, and that's what they do. Both Darby and CM Punk are great at thinking of moments that will be memorable and creating them. I thought, for me, the flow worked much better than it did for you guys. I mean, in the sense of, I did not feel like there were rest holds. I felt like there were holds that were constantly being fought over. There was no feeling of I'm just going to hang out here. I agree. A hold doesn't have to be credibly for submission. You can say this guy's not
Very
going to
down
tap
hold.
out to this, but you're wearing him down and you're
Yep.
controlling him until he finds his way to take control once again. And they were always there was never a feeling of we're just hanging out here and catching our breath, but always of we're trying to use this hold in order to dominate our opponent, and the opponent is always trying to turn it around on us. And the best example of that being that great hammerlock exchange that they had near the beginning. That was just fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
But there were a lot of spots like that. Another example would be where the CM Punk had Darby Allin in the position of an abdominal stretch, but they were like, "That's not even an abdominal stretch. That he's cranking his neck." Like, oh my god, that's really painful. That's that just hyped it up beyond a typical abdominal stretch match. I was like, does that even hurt? It was. I mean, I loved the match, but I was expecting to love the match, and I wish that it had been the main event. Although I agree that if they had been in the main event slot, they might have added a little more fireworks to it. It's very
Yep.
possible. It's
Yep.
just like, hey, we need to throw in a few more memorable spots just because we are in that main event slot.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me that they wouldn't give the main event to CM Punk, just because he has brought so much attention to them. Like, eyeballs that were not there before, people talking about them that weren't talking about them before. But as we're going to get into the post-match stuff at the very end of the show, I understand that they wanted to put all of the attention on that at this point.
Yeah. Well, we will get into that. Before we do though, much like there was a cool down match between Punk and Darby, we're gonna have a little cool down segment between Punk and Darby and the main event. So Paul White versus QT Marshall. I mean, it happened on the show, so we got to talk about it.
We don't.
It's
Skip.
no, it was
I don't think we do.
no.
We
We have to
don't
say
do
no. We have to
on
say
this.
one thought about it. We got to say one thought about it because it happened. It was the most blatant cool down match I've ever seen. And they basically said this is so that you can go to the bathroom, get your popcorn, come back, get ready for the main event because you're gonna want to be here for the main event. So I'm just one quick thought. We'll start with Craig.
Moving. I thought they were leaving because it's like, oh, I thought that was his main event. CM Punk. I saw CM Punk. I'm done.
Look, all I'm saying is
it was just for the one match.
all I'm saying is Garrett says QT versus Paul White was his match of the night. I absolutely agree. Actually, I don't agree. I would have agreed.
No one Wido Gareth.
I would have agreed if Anthony Ogogo had returned, but he
I knew
didn't.
you were
So
gonna
this
say
is
that.
the worst match of the night.
If
This
only
was-
Anthony Ogogo had come out and knocked out Paul White, it would have been.
it would have been my match of the night. It would have been forget Danielson, forget Punk. It was about Anthony Ogogo. Let's just all right, Craig. Your quick thoughts on this one, if you have any.
Just
All
say
right.
skip again.
All right, no.
Paul White looks like he is struggling to move, and yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's hard. This was inoffensive. I didn't pay much attention. I knew it was going to be short. I knew why it was there. I didn't care. I do have stats on it.
Do you?
Yeah. Paul
Didn't
White
bother to post
punched-
them, but they're there.
Yeah. I don't have the graphic.
Paul White got 11 strikes and 2 grapples. QT Marshall got 7 strikes. That was about it. Eight out of Paul White's 11 strikes were knockdowns, strikedowns, which is a lot. I nobody cared.
Well, that's definitely true. Sergi, any thoughts on this one?
Well, I called it. And I did not call it in a the thing I'm looking forward to. It's just as soon as QT Marshall poured his protein drink or whatever on top of Tony Schiavone. I was just like, yeah, this is Paul White's feud. He's been talking about how he wants to get back in the ring, and I'm sure that they agreed when they brought him in. You'll get a match. You'll get a match or two.
Right.
We'll give you a chance to have a few more matches to cap off your career. This was it. Hopefully that's the end of it. Unless of course Shaquille O'Neal wants to fight him, which certainly might happen. But beyond that, that's the end of it.
He's very good on he's very good on commentary, Paul White.
Yeah.
Like, he's a very likable guy.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And very incisive. He points out things that so few color commentators point out. He's just so good at getting the little things. It's like, yes, I've always said that about that guy, and yeah, he's really good at it.
He reminds me a little bit when it comes to color commentators of Tony Romo. I don't know how many people here are watch American football, watch CBS, and are familiar with Tony Romo. But one of the things that he did, one of the things that Romo does so well as a color commentator is he was an average to above average player, but he's so cerebral. He knows the game so well that he will go so far as to just call out plays before they happen. And then they actually happen, and he'll break them down for you, and he'll really let you see a player's perspective on how the game is played. And that's what Paul White is to me. He is an average to above average wrestler. He was through his whole career. He was a champion. He was a good character. He always had something to do. He wasn't great. He was never anyone's favorite wrestler, but he was a good wrestler. But now as a color commentator, he can really lend that expertise, that psychology that he possesses, that intelligence, and really help you see a wrestling match the way a wrestler sees a wrestling match. And from that perspective, he is very valuable to AEW. From a match perspective, look, he's not going to do anything that's going to get anyone excited, but I'm just going to completely 100% agree with Dan in the chat. The QT and Paul was perfect for that spot of the show. It was necessary. If they had gone straight into the main event, the fans would have been absolutely dead. So this is they knew what it was, and they played their roles. So I can't be mad at that. Also, by the way, Dan just reporting to us, this is an exclusive on, not really, but we'll give it to him, that Ruby Soho versus Jamie Hayter announced for Dynamite. That's going to be cool.
Ooh,
I'm
nice.
excited to see that one.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the role for Jamie Hayter. I mean, we don't need her getting involved in Britt's matches, but she can be the gateway. If somebody is on their way to fighting Britt, they fight Jamie first.
Yeah. It sort of reminds me in New Japan, Bad Luck Fale called the Underboss, and that's kind of like you'd have to beat him, you'd have to fight him in order to fight someone like, actually legit from the Bullet Club. That Jamie Hayter could kind of fill that role, like Britt Baker's underboss, if you will.
Except
I
she can
always
wrestle.
like that. Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm not saying she's the same as Bad Luck Fale. I'm just saying. Gareth says Hayter is Baker's Wardlow. In a sense, I can kind of see that. I'm not sure if we're grooming Hayter to turn babyface the same way as I'm still pretty sure Wardlow's going to turn babyface at some point. But I don't know. That's just
happen.
It's speculation. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. But I agree with the general premise. Fale versus Paul White for Full Gear. I'm down with that. That's Dan's suggestion. Bad Luck Fale versus Paul White at Full Gear. I'm cool with that.
We need Shaquille.
Honestly,
one last match, Shaquille O'Neal, and then Paul White is on the commentary desk for good. Please. That's it.
You know what? Just for the spectacle, just for the sheer spectacle
Absolutely.
of Shaquille O'Neal versus Paul White, I'd watch it. Like, it'd suck, obviously, but, who cares? Give him 2 minutes,
no,
whatever.
I mean, it would be fun. How would it suck?
From a match quality,
what else do you
it would
want
suck.
from a wrestling match?
Exactly.
Other than for it to be fun.
Exactly. I'm okay with it. Every so often, I just need a little bit of that carny stuff in wrestling. You can't do it too much, but every so often, you want to just give me a match that I'm like, God, what the hell am I watching? That's fine. I'm okay with that. Garrett suggests Hayter probably turns Baker babyface. I could see that as well. Could go reverse with Wardlow and MJF. So we'll have to see. It is finally time to talk about the main event. Christian Cage versus Kenny Omega for the AEW World Championship. This, to me, I had said that my sneaking suspicion for a while was that everyone was either sure that CM Punk was going to be the main event or wanted CM Punk to be the main event. And I really believe that pissed Kenny Omega off. I really think that he was sitting there like fuming because he's like, I am Kenny Omega and you're telling me that I shouldn't be in the main event. I wasn't in the main event last time. I wasn't in the main event at Double or Nothing. So you're telling me that I shouldn't have been in the main event of this one? I think he was convinced that I'm going to go out there, I'm going to put on a match worthy of the main event. And in my opinion, he did that. I loved this match. This, to me, reminded me, like, if you just look at the numbers, it's actually fairly similar to what we see from Kenny and Okada in terms of how the numbers look. Lots of strikes, but they're very even. Kenny, in this case, got more strikedowns. Normally, in his series with Okada would get more. But either way, you've got the champion getting more strikedowns at the end of the day. Kenny doing more impacts. Christian getting more grapples. You've got dives. You've got Kenny locking him in submissions. You've got tons of reversals. To me, I really enjoyed this match. I think from a storytelling perspective, it worked. I think from a physical perspective, there was spots in here like Kenny jumping through the table. That was an Okada spot. And of course, when he did it to Okada, the table didn't break. In this one, he just shattered the table over Christian's chest, which was cool. I think that almost makes it look more impactful. I just really enjoyed this match. Every second of this match, I was like, man, I'm having fun. You know what I mean? And the finish necessarily, you know, we didn't see what we tend to see, which is like so much involvement from the Good Brothers and all this stuff. At the end of the day, Kenny Omega walks out a better wrestler than Christian Cage, and that was the story they meant to tell. Craig, what did you think about the main event?
Right, so could be slightly theatrical here, so please don't take offense. So you said that this match was similar to Okada Omega. From
a statistical perspective, there I can see the similarities.
Okay. Well, that's good because Okada versus Omega didn't suck. Right. My favorite wrestler in the world is Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega's AEW World title reign has been my least favorite of the 3 AEW World title reigns. It's definitely an issue with expectations. So I really, really loved the Omega Pac Orange Cassidy 3-way. I thought that was great. I thought Kenny Omega's work as a tag team with Adam Page was tremendous. Heck, there was a match with Trent at the beginning of the pandemic, which I thought was like one of the most wonderful 20-minute TV matches that you're ever going to see. I don't understand how I can find this Kenny Omega run so disappointing. But I do. And I don't know if this was just because it was Christian and it's just not that interesting. I actually liked the Rampage match better. I don't know what it is. But this version of Kenny Omega doesn't feel like who he was. He has been on record speaking about how he likes to challenge himself all the time. Can he become one of the best tag team wrestlers in the world after winning the IWGP Championship? He did. He did with Hangman Page. Those matches were amazing. They put on that super famous Revolution 2020 match, which is one of the best tag team matches ever.
Yep.
Certainly in the conversation with the All Japan ones. He has then more recently been on record as saying that he wanted to perfect being an American TV wrestler. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe he thinks that he is trying to perfect a role. Maybe the role doesn't suit him. Maybe he thinks that he needs to change parts of himself to fulfill that role. I don't know. I don't know, but my issue with AEW is that they do not put on the caliber of pay-per-view main event, specifically in 1v1s, that I really get excited about. Like, I love the weekly TV more than I've ever, liked anything before. I love this roster, but they do not put on 1v1 matches in the main event that are on the same level as your classic American matches, like the ones, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels type matches. They're not hitting those levels. They're certainly not hitting the levels of New Japan's 1 versus 1 main events. And I would go as far as to say I don't believe they're really hitting the consistency of good to excellent main event matches that NXT were putting on in kind of 2017-18 either, which to me really bugs me because I like those matches more than anything else in wrestling, essentially. And I don't know. I don't know if it's just me. This match got almost 4 stars on the Grapple app. But maybe it's Christian. I mean, he is like 47, 48 years old. I thought that this should just be a TV match. I think the feud's gone on for too long. I don't know if that's to do with Paige. I don't know if that's because they were relying on Punk and Danielson coming out. Yeah. Don't know. Untangle that. Go for it.
No, I agree completely. I mean, I wouldn't say completely. I definitely see where you're
Somewhat.
coming from, and I definitely feel like Kenny Omega is a fantastic wrestler. He puts on wrestling matches with thrilling moments, and some of his matches are the best matches you'll ever see. And it can be frustrating when a particular match isn't that. But for me, this match was always going to be, because of the spot that it is on the card and because of my personal feelings, I feel biased and like, yeah, I was like, oh, it's okay. It shouldn't have been the main event. There's like that's, and I know that that's pure bias on my part. I feel like if the AEW World Title is so important that it must be in the main event of pay-per-views, then it needs to be on Punk as soon as possible. And that, I know that's biased, but that's how I feel. But Kenny Omega is an amazing wrestler, and I definitely would say that Christian's an amazing wrestler too. Their Rampage match was fantastic. This match was probably fantastic, but we're maybe because of expectations and such being different for the main event of a major pay-per-view versus this crazy one-off match that we got at Rampage, that we're maybe not seeing how good it was. But also the fact that a lot of what makes a wrestling match special and amazing is the feud. And, the feud for Kenny Omega is Adam Page, and everybody's just kind of holding their breath waiting for that to finally blow off, for that to finally, come to fruition. But on top of that, we also have Danielson coming out to challenge how elite Kenny Omega really is. And of course, that's going to be something special too.
So I really think, and we'll get to Danielson and Cole in a second. I really, really think, and this might sound harsh, and I apologize. I don't mean it in a harsh way, but I really think that people had just decided that they weren't going to like this match because they were so invested. They had put it in their mind that Hangman Page was going to beat Kenny at this pay-per-view for the world title, and anything less than that, they were just not going. They were just going to reject flat out. I don't mean that to be harsh because I do understand it, but I did not think that. I mean, well, obviously I thought that Hangman would beat Kenny, and I thought it would happen at this pay-per-view. I said it on the podcast, but I was not so invested in that anything other than that was going to disappoint me. I mean, I think, honestly, I watched the reaction to Bryan Danielson come out, and I'm like, you know what? If you want to put the world title on this guy, do it. Fans love him. I mean, I'm not saying forget about Adam Page, but I'm saying that when I looked at this match, I wanted a great match, and in my opinion, again, personally, I got the match that I wanted. I got a match that I really could sink my teeth into, a match that I was really invested in at a lot of times, and a match that I think what so impressed me about it was that we were all positive that Kenny Omega was not going to lose this, that they gave Christian the Impact title because they wanted someone else to be able to be there on Impact. They wanted to reward Christian. They wanted to thank him for coming back. They wanted to persuade you that Christian could beat Kenny Omega. They wanted all those things. All of that just to shut it all down and say Kenny Omega's winning. But during this match, and specifically, I want to show you this. I want to show you the graph. Specifically at 10 minutes. That's exactly where I was like, maybe Christian could do this. Like, obviously, if you really think about it, he was never going to, but they drew me into that story in such a way that I was suddenly invested in it. And then when Kenny made his comeback and shut down Christian, and you can see 13, 14, 15 minutes, Christian got no offense in, that's sort of the point where I was thinking, now I want Christian to win. Like, they had really taken over. Christian's a babyface. I want him to win. I'm rooting for him. I want him there. I think, look, I'm with you, Craig. Kenny Omega is my favorite current wrestler, and I say that even while Brock Lesnar has returned, but because Kenny Omega competes in AEW, that really puts him over the top for me. Mm-hmm. He is my favorite wrestler currently. He is my second favorite wrestler of all time. I really believe that he might be the greatest wrestler that ever lived. And so the problem is, I think if you compare this, I know I'm the one who brought up the Omega Okada matches. I'm the one who did it, but I just wanted to make a point about this is how Kenny Omega likes to tell stories in a main event level match. But I think when you look at that, his matches with Okada were so good, and they were so just beyond anything that anyone could ever duplicate again, that I think it's unfair to even remember that he had them, right? I mean, it's almost like I treat Kenny Omega as a different person now, because if you compare anything he does now to the Omega Okada matches, you're not going to get you're not going to get that sort of feeling that you want, because all you're thinking about is, well, it's not Okada. Yeah, it's not Okada, but nothing can be Omega Okada. My favorite AEW singles match of all time is Kenny Omega versus Rey Fenix. If you compared that to Omega Okada, you'd be like, yeah, it's good, but it's not that good. So, I think at the end of the day, this is a match that does sway on your personal preferences. It sways on your personal preferences about Kenny Omega, something that Gareth says in the chat, that the crowd was kind of all over the place at times during this match. I don't know about that. I mean, I didn't notice, but I maybe you did notice. I didn't personally. And Gareth also brings up the point that, a lot of people thought that Omega's reign with the IWGP title was disappointing compared to, where we thought it could be. Some people do better as challengers than they do as champions. Famously, Aleister Black in NXT was like that. So there are people where that's just how it is. I don't know if Kenny is one of those people. I think you'll have to, go back on it and decide for yourself. But I thought this match gave me what I wanted, and I really enjoyed it. So again, I'll just go back to I can only speak for myself and give you my perspective of why this match really did work on that level for me.
If we do take that really, really unfair comparison of the Kazuchika Okada matches, it seems from a very brief glance at the statistics, in this match, Kenny Omega and Christian were both heading towards 200 strikes per hour. In the New Japan matches, Okada and Omega neither gets above 100 per hour, so they're differentiating their offense more. There's a heck of a lot more grapples in those matches, always above 10 per hour, often around about 20 per hour, compared to this match, which is 11 per hour and 3 per hour. Is that correct? Jeez, I've got Omega just doing one grapple. Is that even correct?
No,
no, that is not correct. That is a mistake. Oh, that's not good. What on earth's happened here?
That's.
Were you looking at the wrong line?
Yeah.
Oh, I have done Christian's stats, and I have not done Omega's stats. That's really annoying. What a dumbass. Okay. Well, that's frustrating. So everything I just said is meaningless. Okay, so Omega hit seven grapples in this match.
Yeah.
So that is 21
More on
grapples
20.
per hour, so that's on par with what he was doing in Japan. So he's doing more strikes, but he's done the same amount of grapples. Submission, he's doing 30 seconds per hour, so that's about 60. That is significantly less than in Japan, but I mean, attribute, you wouldn't really attribute submissions to why those matches got over. 17
Yeah.
reversals per hour, so that's what, like 51 or something. Again, that's relatively on par with what they were doing in Japan. It's generally around 50 to 60. So yeah, so to summarize, I don't know why this didn't work for me, and I'm maybe not even very good at putting these darn things together. I will
Well,
fix
there was
that.
you were dealing with a lot of stuff, so I forgive you. It's let's roll this in and
You're the
and-
redeemer for us now.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not gonna say I'm not, but I'm not gonna say that that's what's gonna happen on the podcast. Let's roll this in and talk about the post match angle. We already alluded to it that Adam Cole came out and for me it popped me because that one I genuinely wasn't expecting, and it certainly popped the crowd. And one of the loudest cheers of the night was the crowd chanting Adam Cole baby when he got into the ring, which was awesome. And for, I think where we're left now from a storytelling perspective is Adam Cole came in and immediately super kicks Jungle Boy. So Adam Cole's part of the Elite. It's great because Cole is a great heel. I don't think he works as a babyface. I think to introduce him as a heel immediately is totally fine. In fact, he's dating Britt Baker. He's very much the same as Britt Baker from a character perspective, that he's a heel and people love him because he's a heel. And that's just how it's going to be with Adam Cole, I think probably till the end of time. And that's fine. So he's a heel. He's aligned with the Elite. But then Bryan Danielson comes out after all that as Kenny Omega's signing off. Danielson comes out, massive pop. His theme, by the way, is incredible. I've been listening to that like nonstop for the last 48 hours or however long it's been. And it just like, you just feel the energy. I think that's the biggest thing that Bryan Danielson brings is no one else in the world just like channels energy the way he does and just like is able to. He's got the crowd in the palm of his hands and just everything he does, the fans are just, they're hanging on every single thing he does. And look, I don't know if this is leading to Danielson versus Omega at maybe it's in New York. I don't know if they want to
Soon.
like, I don't know if they want to push it all the way to Full Gear. That might be an option. I mean, if you're one of those people that says what Craig said, that AEW on a pay-per-view has not put on that sort of, 11-star singles match that we were sort of expecting, I don't know what to tell you. Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson kind of is that. It's going to be that match. So I don't know what they want to do. Yeah, but look, I don't know what they want to do, but I certainly think that there's no bad direction they can take. As a whole, this angle really worked for me. I was into it. I was there, and I really liked this from moment one up until we faded to black. Sergi, what did you think about this angle?
I was of two minds the whole time. As I'd mentioned, I definitely was the whole time thinking, if it were me, I would have made different creative decisions. But at the same time, acknowledging this is really working. This is really working for the fans. I can see how someone with not the same bias as me going into it would really be loving this. And I actually love this, despite those biases, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And Adam Cole coming out and the way that he came out worked for people on both sides of that fence. If you are like underwhelmed by Adam Cole, you go, oh, this schmuck, and then he turns heel and it's like, yay, I get to boo him. And then Bryan Danielson comes out and it's like, oh, there was a bigger reason than just freaking Adam Cole for this to be the main event angle. Okay, that's good. then yeah, and then flip side of that, if you love Adam Cole and you kind of want to cheer him, you got to do that for a second, and then feel betrayed as you are supposed to feel when he turns on the good guys and aligns himself with the villains. And he is the second string villain, which is the perfect spot for him. Finally, instead of being the leader, he is the lieutenant, and I think that that's a great role for him.
Well, that's interesting. I thought I really like him as a leader. I thought as a leader he was great with Undisputed Era. I mean, obviously it got stale eventually, as all things do, but I don't know. Again, personal preference. I certainly don't mind him being the lieutenant, as you say. I think that's a great role for him as well.
Mm-hmm. And then of course, to top all of that off is Danielson coming out to the amazing theme. Don't get me wrong. I would have loved it if it had been Final Countdown 2. That would have been pretty fantastic. But he prefers the Flight of the Valkyries, or feels that it's more well known or more closely associated with him. That's fine. And apparently, it's a great mix of it with some other things. But the important thing is, like you said, just an amazing connection that he has with the fans, and that hasn't changed for a decade.
Yep.
Just any time that he comes out, he gets the reaction he wants from the fans, and right now that is a reaction of adulation, and it's amazing. And that's what you need to really make a match not disappoint.
Yeah.
When we say that people had mixed reactions about the main event tonight, or the other night. You loved it. Others were underwhelmed. Nobody thought it wasn't technically pretty good, or even on the edge of great. But what's going to push that over is a character that people are really invested in,
Right.
like Adam Page and like Bryan Danielson, and those are the two most obvious upcoming feuds for Kenny Omega, so that should be amazing. And then on the technical level, Kenny Omega, we don't know how good he could be in a truly high-level singles match because he hasn't done it yet, but he could be one of the best. And
Yeah.
Danielson is the opposite of that. We know for a fact that he can bring out the very best in someone, which is exactly what we know about Kenny Omega, that he has the capacity to bring out the very best in someone. So what is that match going to be like?
Yeah.
We have yet to see, but it looks like we're going to.
Well, it's with Kenny Omega, absolutely no disrespect to Orange Cassidy or to John Moxley or to Christian, any of these guys that he's had singles matches with. But when you talk about the heights that Kenny Omega is capable of achieving, he achieved those with two men, right? Either Okada or Ibushi. And between those three, you're talking about three of the best wrestlers of this generation. And in the case of Omega and Okada, two guys that easily are in the greatest of all time discussion. Easily. And at a push, you could maybe put Ibushi in there as well. Maybe. It takes two to tango, right? So as great as everyone that Omega has faced is, they're not on the Okada level. But Bryan Danielson may very well be on the Okada level. So to put Omega in there with someone who is on his level as a wrestler physically, that tends to create some of the greatest matches of all time. I mean, I'm just calling it like I see it. That's what tends to happen when you get guys in there like that with Kenny. So I don't want to be putting out those expectations, but immediately when Bryan Danielson announced, when we found out that he wasn't re-signing with WWE, the first thing everyone thought was Danielson versus Omega. And that's, it certainly seems as though that's what we might be getting here. So I'm not going to complain about that. Maybe that will be AEW's mythical 7-star match that everyone's been waiting for. I don't know. I think there's lots of people in AEW that are capable of having great matches, but there are very few people that are guaranteed to have a great match. And to me, Omega and Danielson, I don't see how that match isn't just absolutely phenomenal at its floor is like 4.5 stars. If you want to use that rating. So I don't know, Craig. How do you feel about this main event angle? Are you as excited as Sergi and I are for the prospect of Omega versus Danielson? How did you come out of this show feeling about all this?
Yeah, so I'm very high on Adam Cole. I think that he has the potential to he'll instantly be on the level of guys like MJF. And I think that he has the potential to very easily be a main event kind of superstar in AEW going forward as Kenny Omega kind of transitions out over the next kind of 5 years or so, or I don't know how, if it's closer. Then I think Adam Cole will very easily take up one of those spots. I really loved him in NXT. He did some amazing things. I think that he's a guy that if you can somehow get him in a match with Kenny Omega, then things could work out really well. Danielson, you would unless something went wrong, that's a very special match again with Omega. I'm very intrigued to see how the Page match shakes out with Omega. That match at Full Gear last year was very, very good. It was obviously an abridged version of it, but it was extremely good. So it'd be really interesting to see how that goes. I just something is bugging me about the way that he is being presented or the way that he is fighting in the ring at the moment. But I mean, Brian, you could have to hope that Brian Danielson match would be excellent at least. But it's weird because Kenny Omega's in this position where he's almost coming to the end of his character arc as heel champion. It feels like I was a proponent of things had got so interesting with the Forbidden Door, and Jay White was in America, and Danielson was potentially coming into AEW. I was saying that that Kenny Omega should be beating Adam Page at All Out, and then further down the line, Page would come back around and win it again. I would win it eventually. So yeah, I don't know. It almost feels like there's not enough time for Omega to do all these things unless the Danielson match is post Page or those kind of things.
I think at the end of the day, what we're left with is a lot of different possibilities of how this match, of how this feud, of how Kenny Omega as a champion could go from here. And I for one, I mean, I understand that we are part of the internet wrestling community. We love to do fantasy booking. We love to do things like that. And normally I'm totally with that. But in this particular time, there's so many people coming in and there's so many options and there's so much stuff. I'm totally content to say, you know what? I'm not even going to think about what might happen. I'm going to sit here and wait, and maybe we'll get Omega Danielson, maybe we'll get Omega Punk, maybe we'll get Omega Page, maybe we'll get Omega White on AEW, maybe we'll get Omega Okada on AEW. Like, you know what? This stuff. I know that Will Ospreay was in the US recently. Maybe we'll get Omega Ospreay. Like, I don't care. Give me any of it. It doesn't really matter. I'm not concerned with trying to figure out how this stuff might go. I'm more concerned with the number of matches out there that are going to be matches that I remember for the rest of my life, and that's all I really care about at the end of the day is the possibility of those matches happening. So, to
bring it back to Danielson, though, I think that an important thing to remember is that we are going to get a chance to see an unleashed Bryan Danielson in ways that we maybe haven't seen in a very long time, that we may never have seen again. And there's two sides to that. One is if we want to turn back the clock to the last time he faced Kenny Omega, this is a match that's very controversial because it has some very silly moments. Bryan Danielson is very capable of being very silly and ridiculous, and he's great at comedy. It's one of the things he's really good at. He's great at many things, but one of the things he's really good at is bringing silliness and a sense of fun to what he's doing. And that's why when originally the question was put out by Joe of, you know, CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, who do you see as their first feuds? My choice was Orange Cassidy. I would love to see that at some point down the road. Now on the flip side of that, though, is you know, when asked about, you know, what he sees his role is, you know, in the post show media scrum, you know, Danielson said, you know, CM Punk has been saying all these nice things about how he wants to help the kids out. I want to kick their heads in. And that's an aspect of his character that just the viciousness and the and the just genuine sadism of and not the kind that not the gory kind that you expect of someone like Penta or you know, somebody who's in a lot of bloody matches, but of just a real stretcher, a hooker. This is the kind of thing that he's going to bring to the table that we haven't seen for a while, because it's not a part of where he was, and that he clearly is looking forward to bringing back as a part of what he does and showcasing again now that he's in an environment where he can do that.
Yep, very well said, and that's exactly what I want to see from him. Punk is doing the whole, you know, mentor thing, and I want to help these young guys. I respect them. You know, Darby Allin would have been my favorite wrestler at 15 and all this kind of stuff. All that is great, but sometimes you really just need someone to come in there and say, you know what, it's going to sound callous. Sometimes you need people to come in and say, fuck them kids. You know, I am Bryan Danielson, and I'm going to start kicking people's heads off, and that's what we're going to do. And
Did you just bring in a quote for Brock Lesnar and tie it in?
I believe the exact quote from Lesnar was, "I don't give a shit about your kids," and that could have worked too. So sometimes you do need that, and my mind was open with Danielson. I wasn't convinced that that's what I wanted to see from him, but you just see how people react to him, and you see, look, he looks good. I mean, he looks trimmed, he looks fit, he looks powerful. Everything about it is like, you know what, this guy wants to come in and tear some people's heads off. I am down with that. I am good to see him do that.
That's what you really notice about both Dan and Punk. They just look so healthy and ready to go. Like not like guys who are at the, you know, in the twilight of their career at all.
Oh yeah.
It's just like they look like they're ready to have a decade, you know, and it's amazing. Yeah, all you can do is look forward to it, and then that brings us to the final. And I think it's been brought up a couple times, but you know, in addition to all the other things they could do, it's not something we haven't seen before. It's not a dream match. It's a return to a fight forever situation. Eventually we're going to see Danielson versus Punk again, and that's going to be something, you know, because they're both in a different place now, and you know, it's a case of what we did was special before, can we top it? And they're going to try to, and that's going to be amazing.
Yep, I absolutely agree. Gareth in the chat, Heath Slater versus Bryan Danielson dream match. Yeah. I can't imagine a better first match for Bryan Danielson in AEW. So many possibilities, so many things could happen, and that's really why we love wrestling at the end of the day. It always keeps us guessing. It always keeps us thinking. The final question that I'm going to pose to you, this is something that I have seen on social media. It's something that I think we've all seen being put out there. So I'm just going to ask you both quickly, and I'm going to start with Greg. Is this AEW's best ever pay-per-view?
Yes, I can't think of what would be better. The first Double Out was pretty good because I had the Cody Austin match, and then Moxley came out at the end. But to be honest with you, I don't really think there's much competition, especially when you look at the gravity of what happened at the end. Like when you had those like two, they're almost like War Games teams or Survivor Series teams facing off against each other in the ring.
That's actually exactly what I was thinking. I heard Regal's voice in my head. Shouting War Games.
Yeah, I don't think it's even close. You've got one of, if not the best AEW match ever, an assembled cast of fantastic wrestlers, really good women's title match, the Moxley Kojima match, which was very different, that huge moment with Punk. Yeah, I would go yes on that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Really had it all, didn't it? Sergi, what do you think? Is this AEW's best ever pay-per-view?
Well, I've said that there are things I would have done different. I've mentioned this, and I don't want to make that a really negative thing, because despite that, it still was an amazing, amazing night. And I definitely would not agree that there's no close competition. I would say that Revolution 2020 was a very, very close competition for me.
Yes.
Whenever people ask what's the one match that you would recommend someone who's never watched wrestling before to try wrestling, for me, it's always Orange Cassidy versus Pac. But yes, it's close for me, but I definitely would say that this is the best show they've put on.
Okay, I'm so glad that you brought up Revolution 2020, because that for me has been my favorite AEW pay-per-view, and it's so funny that, if you're talking the one match that you would show someone who's never watched wrestling, mine also comes from that show, but it's a different match, right? It's
Tag
the
match.
Exactly. It's Bucks versus Omega and Page, but I love Revolution 2020, but this show has everything that Revolution 2020 had. But one more thing, and it had that genuine crowd, like visceral crowd reaction, both to Punk and to Cole and to Danielson. And at Revolution 2020, it had all the matches that you could possibly want, but it did not have that moment of Punk entering or Cole debuting or even Suzuki coming out, or, of course, Danielson debuting. And that, to me, puts All Out 2021 over the top as being AEW's best ever pay-per-view. They brought it, and this in a lot of ways, I'm not saying that if this had been a dud, AEW would have collapsed as a company. It certainly would not have. But it would have been a huge setback if this were a dud of a pay-per-view, because a lot of people were tuning in to watch this. I wouldn't be surprised if this was AEW's biggest ever buy rate by a wide margin for this one. A lot of people came to watch this, and AEW, in my opinion, delivered everything that people could want from a wrestling pay-per-view. The last thing I will say is this. There's a friend of mine who I have known since very early when I became a wrestling fan, and he was a staunch AEW hater. I mean, he hated AEW. He hated everything about it. And he said, I will never watch AEW. I hate the product. I hate what they're about. I will never watch it. After All Out 2021, he became an AEW fan. And he's tuning in with me to watch Dynamite on Wednesday. That's what All Out is about. It's about showing people that AEW is not just some counterculture company that, you may not like because, you like WWE and you think you can't like one if you think you can't like them both. And that's not true. You can be a fan of AEW, and AEW at All Out 2021 gave you a reason to be a fan. And that's, I think, the lasting legacy of what this pay-per-view is going to be about. And the lasting legacy
Speaking of the crowd reaction that they had, another great thing from the post-show media scrum was CM Punk saying, what's next? We've done Allstate Arena. Let's do Soldier Field. Let's do Wrigley Field. Let's go. Let's fucking go. He is ready to build this into something that is going to have like the biggest crowds, the most rabid crowds, and get that amazing reaction of like these massive crowds that we haven't seen before.
That would be really, really something special, and I can't wait to see it if it happens. What has been special is the first ever live edition of the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. We've had a great time with everyone in the chat. We've had a great time. If you tuned in, thank you very much. We will continue to do this, I believe. I had a lot of fun. So hopefully we will move this over to the Pro Wrestling Musings YouTube channel and do it live over there. That is the plan. So follow us on social media, and we will keep you updated with exactly how this is going to go. But for now, we have had a fantastic time. Gareth says keep doing it live. So Gareth, for you, we will keep doing it live. Before we sign off, you know the drill. Craig, please tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, head on over to the prowrestlingmusings.com website. That's where all the good stuff is. You can find me at Craig PW Musings on Twitter.
And we will let Craig go to bed shortly because all of this excitement is bringing Craig down. I can see the fatigue. Sergi,
it's 11
right
o'clock
there.
And I have a small child.
Exactly. I'm not blaming you at all. I'm not blaming you at all in any sense. Sergi, right down there, please tell the people where they can find you.
All right, just below us, in most places where you're likely to see this, you will see my Twitter handle. If you go there, you will see the little things I have to say. But if you go to my profile, you'll see a link to a website link. That will take you to prowrestlingmusings.com, Styles Make Fights, where you will see all of my columns that I put out on a reasonably regular basis, analyzing the matches based on the great data that I get from Craig on the historically what they've each wrestler has done in the past in terms of their mix of offense, and that's a really fun thing to do. And I know I mention this every time I'm on. I'm still working on the Learning Tree project. Hopefully in a week or two I will be ready to begin putting that out there, and that is exploring the heritage of pro wrestling training and who trained whom, and taking that back as far as we can in history, and learning what we can about the history and heritage of pro wrestling through those family trees of trainer and trainee.
That is a huge project, so we appreciate everyone's patience, but it's well worth the wait, I'm telling you right now. We've gotten to see little snippets of it, the Pro Wrestling Musings writing team, and I can tell you it's better than what you're expecting. I'll leave you with this. Gareth says that we made his evening of being ill much better. Gareth, I appreciate that. That's what we are here to do. I have been Griff from GA. You can go check out my personal YouTube channel at General Admission Wrestling, or just follow this Twitch channel right here at Griff_from GA, where in like half an hour I'm going to be, playing some video games, which is what I usually do here. But go on over to YouTube. If you're not already, subscribe to the Pro Wrestling Musings YouTube channel. We got a ton of great stuff over there, always adding to the video catalog, and we're always adding stuff. There will be no shortage of things to talk about with what AEW has provided us. So thank you all so much for making the first live edition of the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast special. We will do this in the future, but until then, have a great week. Enjoy AEW. Enjoy any wrestling you're watching, and we will talk to you next time on the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. Thank you all once again. We really appreciate you all.